Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable, see playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 3181, Descend. At that moment, Merkab couldn't see what was happening on the other side. What he saw was only a blurry white light ball that appeared above the array. He clearly knew that the white light ball represented that certain powerful race. Furthermore, the reason the Elephant Man race had survived on stage 17 until now was also because of that powerful race. It could be said that the light ball was like God who had saved the Elephant Man race. After a few moments, Merkab gestured and signaled all the Elephant Men to kneel down. In turn, all of them including Richie, knelt on the ground and devoutly bowed to the white light ball. Meanwhile, the water spirit, or the gathering of the many element spirits that were on stage 32 watched the scene rather impatiently. The element spirit race were known for being the purest creatures, as all of them were made up of the most basic elements. For them, all living creatures with flesh and blood were filthy and impure. Of course, the Elephant Man race were no exception. What's the matter? The water spirit asked. Although the water spirit had convened its companions, it was still the owner of the body where everyone was gathered. Thus, out of politeness, it should be the one to speak first. I saw the other shore key. It's the one to this place. Merkab exclaimed. He placed the board in a vertical position and pointed to the right side of it, which was the area shaped like a triple gourd. As soon as Merkab finished speaking, the consciousnesses inside the body of the water spirit began to fluctuate. Is it the temple in the past? Has the key to the temple finally appeared? We had tried every way we had to enter it at that time, but those forces had fought for so many years, and no one ever succeeded in the end. Indeed, and now, we finally got this great opportunity. The element spirit race quietly communicated with each other immediately through their consciousness. In just about 3 seconds, they had already talked about the past of stage 17. Back then, the element spirit race, along with 2 other forces, had all obtained the position of the ruler of stage 17. At that time, the element spirit race had also thought that only they could dig out the thing in that dangerous place, but in the end they just failed. However, the failure of the other 2 forces made the element spirit race feel relieved, so the exploration of the dangerous place in stage 17 was then put aside. The only reason the element spirit race had casually supported the Elephant Man race on stage 17 was so the latter could work for them. If ever the other shore key appeared one day, they would naturally know it the first time. Truth be told, the element spirit race didn't have much hope that the Elephant Man race would discover anything. They even almost forgot about the Elephant Man race for a long time, until their race's high priest, Merkab, had crushed the heavenly spirit bead. What should we do? Let those monkeys think of a solution. A fire spirit asked. Humph, those monkeys can only hide in the darkness. What's their use anyway? They had screwed things up on stage 14 not long ago. They couldn't do anything right. A metal spirit complained. The key point is that the monkeys are not strong enough, and the purified being of stage 17 is not under our control. I'm afraid we can only let the Moonfire slaves go down there, the water spirit suggested. There were no doubts about the strength of the Moonfire slaves, but if they directly went down from stage 32, then there would be a great price to pay. Furthermore, the strength of the Moonfire slaves would also be greatly reduced. The Moonfire slaves normally did not appear in areas lower than stage 30, but such an opportunity was rare and hard to get, which was why the element spirit race found it worthy of their great attention. When the other members of the element spirit race hesitated, a fire spirit asked, which race does the creature who holds the other shore key belong to? Merkab, who stayed in the metal array while he waited for the light ball's orders, had heard the light ball's question and answered honestly, humans, 2 of them to be exact. There is one of them whose face I couldn't see clearly, but he can be as tall as us when his wild god body is activated. The news about what Zen and Elvinia did on stage 14 had spread widely. The element spirit race also knew about it, but they did not pay much attention. As soon as Merkab finished speaking, the element spirits immediately understood what had happened. It turned out that the human who had occupied stage 14 had now stepped into stage 17. Moreover, this human happened to have the other shore key. They knew that it was not a coincidence. Make the Moonfire slaves descend. I agree, I agree. Quote. Not long after, the door of the hall opened from the middle. 3 huge Moonfire slaves walked forward, and the entire hall trembled slightly with their footsteps. Green flames spread from their necks, waists, and ribs, and the fierce and tyrannical aura they emitted was very palpable. As soon as the 3 Moonfire slaves stood in the center of the metal array began to rotate again. Whoosh! As the metal array spun wildly, they turned into a white ray of light and eventually flew straight towards stage 31. There were traces of dark green flames that were visible in the white light. Some powerful creatures that lived on stage 31 and 32 saw the dark green flames and immediately knew what the element spirit race were doing. They were bringing karma fire and calamity to a lower stage again. On the other hand, the Moonfire slaves descended all the way to stage 31. Stage 30, stage 29, stage 18. Until they finally reached stage 17. While all of those were happening, the elephant men were still on their knees. To the ignorant and backward elephant man race, that ball of white light was the manifestation of God. As long as it was there, they did not dare to leave without permission. Most of the elephant men deeply revered and were highly devoted to the God. They thought that since the God had manifested himself, then would the God bless them with graces. As they hoped and waited, a white and green beam of light was cast down. Boom, boom, boom. The second the white and green light shone down, it destroyed the entire array into pieces. The damage in the center of the array left a crater with a diameter of 5,000 feet. If it had been in a normal world of humans, that crater would be unimaginably huge. However, the elephant man race were all over 10,000 feet tall. Thus, the huge crater was only the same size as the water tanks they used. Just then, 3 huge Moonfire slaves slowly crawled out of it. Once they had fully gotten out and saw the elephant men who were much bigger than them, they were rendered speechless. It was true that they had a towering height of about 300 feet, but they were nothing compared to the elephant men who were over 10,000 feet tall. Well, the repressive force of stage 17 hasn't come yet, said one of the Moonfire slaves. How should we deal with these elephant men? How? They might already be dead. When stage 17 did not suppress the power of the Moonfire slaves, they were as strong as they had been on stage 32. In fact, the shock waves of the flames their bodies released were enough to burn everything on stage 17. As for Richie, Merkab, and the elephant men who stood closest to the Moonfire slaves, they were oblivious to what had happened. They only felt that a heatwave had washed over them, until they completely lost consciousness and their bodies had turned into coke. Chapter 3182, Arrival. The elephant men who were a bit far away from the Moonfire slaves were shocked by what they saw. The scorching hot aura had spread towards them, forcing them to retreat. Chieftain, High Priest, the elephant men murmured as they retreated. They didn't understand why these things that had come down would kill the High Priest. Didn't they appear because they felt their piety? But why would they kill the devout believers? Number 12, what should we do with these elephant men? Asked one of the Moonfire slaves. The Moonfire slaves didn't have their own names. In fact, it was not only them, but most of the members of the element spirit race that didn't have names. A name was a noble symbol in the element spirit race. It represented a distinct individual and ordinary creatures were not qualified to have one. The names of the Moonfire slaves were a series of numbers. The closer the numbers were to number 1, the stronger they were. The names of the 3 were No. 12, number 13 and No. 14. They were incredibly powerful among the Moonfire slaves and number 12 was the strongest among them. Naturally, he was the leader of the 3. They are useless. Get rid of them, number 12 replied indifferently. Number 13 took a slow step forward and lightly pressed his foot to the ground. As he did, a ball of green flame spread from beneath his foot throughout the entire village. Some elephant men realized something was terribly wrong and rushed to escape the village. Dong, 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 dong. A chaotic rumble of footsteps sounded from the tribe as they rushed out, but no matter how fast they were, escaping the spreading green flames was impossible. The village continued to burn and the sprinting elephant men were turned to huge balls of fire. The low buildings, grass, totems, everything the tribe owned, were ignited and engulfed in dark green flames. As the elephant men were burned, 3 small balls appeared above the heads of the 3 Moonfire slaves and moved into their bodies, quickly suppressing their amazing strength. This suppressive force came from stage 17, and it was almost impossible to resist. The strength being pushed down was followed by great pain. They struggled but eventually managed to adapt to it. I heard those two are purified beings. Their strength can't be underestimated, said number 14 worriedly. When one's strength was suppressed, their confidence often went with it. If they are really purified beings capable of crossing the stages of the other shore, that would be troublesome to deal with, number 13 agreed. Before, that was true, but now it may not be that difficult, number 12 replied menacingly. Number 13 and number 14 remained silent. The suppressive force of the other shore was impossible to overcome. This was a known fact set in stone. Until now, the element spirit race had found a way to avoid it, and all it would cost was their lives. Number 12 might have only been a little stronger than the other two, but he was the leader here. If someone needed to be sacrificed to remove the suppression, it would have to be either number 13 or number 14. Let's go. Hopefully we'll be a step ahead of them and reach the dangerous region first, number 12 ordered, not caring what the others thought. All he needed was to complete the task assigned by the element spirits. A gust of wind swept by, causing the several 100-feet-high grass of the grassland to bend and sway like a field of rolling green waves. Zen and Elvinia were still moving through the north of the grassland, unaware of what had happened to the tribe of the elephant men. If this grassland were not so huge and vast, Zen would have sped through terrifyingly quick. But here, the lightning he had turned into was but a tiny needle. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Suddenly, behind Zen, buzzing sounds could be heard. A few giant bees the size of houses flapped their translucent wings as they swiftly chased after Zen. 3 more bees have come. Zen narrowed his eyes and warned Elvinia, get ready. He then threw Elvinia high into the air. As she flew, his body began expanding and became 10,000 feet high in the blink of an eye. Swoosh. Now a giant, Zen swung his palms and slapped down hard, smashing the 3 giant bees into pieces. The moment they were crushed, Zen turned and shrunk down to his regular size, catching Elvinia as she fell back down and continued on his way forward. It was hard to tell how many times they had come across these giant bees on their way. Although they were both capable of killing the bees, capturing and killing them would take a lot more effort than if Zen transformed into a wild god. After only 2 encounters, Zen had devised this simplest plan to deal with them: slap them to death the way he would kill a fly. A few rounds of this and Zen was already very skilled at it, effortlessly sending them to a quick death. Half a day later, giant wood fences appeared before them. These fences marked the edge of the grassland. We have arrived at the edge of the grassland, said Elvinia. Zen nodded in acknowledgement and made his way through the fences. It seemed that only the grassland in the south of stage 17 was filled with giant creatures. Everything went back to normal once they crossed to the other side of the fences. However, there was a cyan-gray gobi adjacent to the grassland, and farther away from the gobi was a vast desert. According to the map, once they crossed the grassland they should walk along the gobi. After confirming their direction, Zen and Elvinia continued on, following the map. They had only gone a short distance, when in the corner of the gobi, the heads of several mice stuck out of many little caves. Squeak! There are outsiders coming this way again. Their objective seems clear: they should be heading for the dangerous place. If they wish to die, there is no need to stop them. They can't even survive meeting the lamps. They will die for sure. Squeak, squeak, squeak. No one has visited the dangerous place for many years. We'd better be careful, we have to inform the others. The mice quickly ducked back into their caves. After walking down more than 200 miles, Zen and Elvinia finally caught sight of the end of the gobi. They could now see the desert and the grassland intertwined in the distance, the 2 areas forming a circle. Here it is. Zen opened his palm, stared at the map presented by the other shore key, and said, this circle should be the bottom part of the gourd-shaped area. Finally finding the destination marked by the other shore key had Zen brimming with excitement. After observing and taking it all in for a moment, he and Elvinia then flew towards the desert. Chapter 3183, Black Lamps. As he hovered in the sky above the desert, Zen looked around but still failed to find anything special. He flew past the circular desert bordered by grassland without stopping. Soon, he came across another similarly shaped terrain. This time, the circular area was the grassland being surrounded by a desert. Without any hesitation, Zen flew past it as well and arrived at the end of a 3rd circle. I bet the temple must be around here, Zen exclaimed. After going over the area, he was certain they were on the right track. Elvinia gave her surroundings a confused look. Why would a temple be located here? There's nothing but sand for miles, she complained. The 3rd circular piece of land was a vast expanse of flat gobi, including the end of it. If the temple was here, they should have been able to spot it by now. Once they landed, Elvenia lowered her head to carefully tread across the ground they stood. Huh, her eyes suddenly lit up in surprise. She pointed to the ground and yelled, "Zen, come and have a look." Directly beneath her feet was the long outline of what remained of some sort of foundation. Most of it was buried underground. Zen walked up and down the foundation's remains, tediously observing it alongside Elvenia. An idea suddenly popped up in his mind. Swiftly, he flew towards the sky and hovered before looking down and narrowing his eyes. As expected, everything was much clearer from a bird's-eye view. He hadn't paid any attention to the ground upon arriving. But now seeing it from up here, he could clearly see the frame of a huge temple beneath him. "Do you see anything?" Elvenia bellowed from below. Zen nodded as he made his slow descent from the sky. "Yes, the foundation of the temple is buried underneath the gobi," he replied. "Then that means the temple we've been searching for is right beneath our feet?" Elvenia asked. "It's possible." Suddenly, Zen shook his head from left to right as he recalled something. "However, something's still off here. This is the temple's foundation. If we can see it from here, then that means the temple is erected at this spot and that we should have been inside its walls by now." Zen raised his hand to point at their surroundings. "So you're saying we're already inside the temple?" Elvenia asked again, the doubt still all over her face. "Well, there's one way to confirm that. We won't be able to leave the other shore if we're right inside a temple, so let's give this one a try." Once Zen finished speaking, he began chanting the illusion-breaking rune. Normally, using the rune would have returned him to his cultivation room in the source world. But that didn't happen this time. Instead, he remained on the other shore. Elvenia's curiosity grew as she witnessed this. She began to follow suit, chanting her own illusion-breaking rune. But her soul of light, just like Zen, was unable to escape the other shore too. Could this mean they were both trapped within the confines of an invisible temple? "What a strange place this is," she commented, the fear making her voice tremble ever so slightly. She walked along the temple's foundation and left the temple's confines before giving it another shot. This time, as soon as she finished chanting the illusion-breaking rune, her body of the purified being closed her eyes and knelt down on the ground, motionless. It was obvious that her soul of light had left the other shore. It wasn't long before her body began to regain consciousness as her soul returned. As she sat on the ground with an astonished look, she looked up into Zen's eyes. His suspicions were right all along. "Zen, what's going on?" she asked him. Zen shook his head and said with a frown, "Maybe we entered the temple in a wrong way, and thus we can't see it even if we are inside it. But how are we supposed to enter it? We can't even find a proper keyhole for the other shore key," Elvenia reminded him. If they could use the other shore key, the temple would probably appear clearly in their vision. But now all they could see was miles and miles of barren gobi surrounding them. Where could they find the keyhole? Zen wandered around as he examined every inch of earth. However, no clues could be found. He raised his palm to check the map on it. Although he had deeply carved the map into his mind, he had made a new discovery after a careful observation. Normally, the temple was marked at the center of a map. But on this map, the temple was located somewhere on the lower portion. Instead, it was the three circular regions Zen had passed over that were in the map's center. Zen's intuition told him that there might be a hidden meaning to those three circular regions. "Come with me." Zen stepped forward and grabbed Elvenia's hand. They soared high into the sky, once more. "What did you find?" she asked him curiously. "The temple is here, I'm sure of it. It's just that we entered it the wrong way," Zen explained. "Then how do we correctly enter the temple?" Elvenia asked, confused. Zen didn't answer. He brought her back to the edge of the first circular region they had passed earlier. On the map, he discovered a small opening in the north of the circle. As they landed by the opening, they entered the circular region by walking from north to south along the edge of the desert. As soon as they set foot on the sand, the scenery around them changed dramatically. Numerous lampstands rose out of the scorching desert sand one at a time, the tips of their wicks burning with black flames. The other ends of the extremely long wicks extended to the ground, with shadows bound to them. The shadows were in various shapes. There were shadows of humans, beasts, monsters and so on. A few shadows sat still on the ground while others struggled in desperation around the lampstands they were attached to, which left circular trails on the sand. As an ominous aura emanated from them, Elvenia felt a chill running up and down her spine. Frowning, she asked, What is this place?" "The only way to the temple entrance," Zen replied calmly, his voice free of any fear. The high priest from the elephant man race had warned them of the dangers this place held. In fact, 3 purified beings that possessed great power had met their end here. Zen never expected them to enter this place easily. Wait here, I'll go have a look first, Zen ordered her. The lamp stands were arranged in such a way that they were at equal distances apart from each other. All lamps had wicks long enough for the shadows to move in a 100-foot radius around the stands, leaving no space to go around the shadows. Realizing that there was no shortcut, Zen had no choice but to break through the terrifying path before him. He slowly approached the nearest lamp stand to which the shadow of a dog was tied. It dozed off, snoring and lying motionless on the ground. Once Zen entered the area bathed in lamplight, however, the dog woke up and immediately pounced on him ferociously. Zen subconsciously dodged to the side, but the shadow's speed was surprisingly fast. Realizing he couldn't avoid the attack, Zen outstretched his hand to defend himself. The dog bit deep into his arm. However, something odd happened. Zen didn't feel the slightest bit of pain from its teeth. His chaotic source spirits received no damage. As it turned out, the shadow was just like a ghost that could easily pass through his body. All that it left was a vague bite mark on his arm. Chapter 3184, The Hidden Spirit Lamp and the Hidden Beast. Suspicion grew within Zen as he stood still, analyzing the bite mark on his arm. It wasn't painful or itchy. It just looked like a harmless gray tattoo. The dog landed and almost immediately rushed at him again with blinding speed. Zen leaned back and tried to dodge again, but failed and was bitten on the neck. There was now a bite mark on his neck as well, neither painful nor itchy. After being bitten twice, Zen unleashed a burst of strength from his legs and retreated to Elvinia's side. The dog's shadow pulled the black wick straight, roaring at Zen non-stop. Zen, are you okay? Elvinia grabbed Zen's arm and looked at the gray bite mark. It will probably be fine, but I'm afraid these bite marks are not that simple, Zen said with a frown. He had no fear of these vicious beasts tied to the lampstands attacking him head-on. With the suppressive force of stage 17 present, the creatures in this stage wouldn't be too powerful. He believed he would be able to withstand anything thrown at him. But these bite marks had given him cause for pause. Then, it'd be better to not go in, right? Asked Elvinia. She didn't know what was going on with the temple. She thought that if it was too dangerous, they should just give up. No, Zen replied firmly. His determination left Elvinia not knowing what to say next. Zen stood motionless, surveying the lampstands. As he did so, he asked, No. 9527, Master Regal Jade, do you have any knowledge of what this is? It was naturally much easier for him to know the world considering he had 2 wise people within his body. I did not expect such a strange place to exist in stage 17. My master has never come into contact with this before, answered number 9527. Number 9527 had some memories of stage 17 from its master, but its master had never come here. The regal jade spirit hesitated for a long while before replying, this seems to be the hidden spirit lamp. Although it has been a long time, and I've only seen it once, it's most likely what it is. What is the hidden spirit lamp? Zen asked curiously. Whatever it was, having any sliver of information on it was valuable. It's a kind of lamp in the 3 purities stage. When the Wing King and I went to stage 33, we saw one. The beasts tied to the lamps are called hidden beasts. The cyan grasshopper that explored the stage with us was attacked by a hidden beast, leaving a gray mark on its head. What happened to it after that? Zen asked, listening intently. Although it took place in stage 33, it sounded very much like what they were going through. The cyan grasshopper was around as strong as I was. When it was attacked by the hidden beast, nothing strange occurred. But once we had traveled some distance, its head suddenly exploded. The regal jade spirit recalled. It's that deadly? Zen asked with his eyebrows suddenly raised and his concern growing. All creatures of the regal jade civilization possessed extremely tough bodies. Not only that, the cyan grasshopper was a formidable master in the 33rd stage of the other shore realm, said to be as powerful as a chaos ancient god. And yet, the hidden beast had killed it. A gloom fell over Zen as he stared at the gray mark on his arm. Yes, it's that deadly, the regal jade spirit nodded. Were there others attacked by that hidden beast? Zen followed up. After the hidden beast launched an attack, the Wing King rushed to the lampstand and extinguished the black flame on it. Once the black flame was extinguished, the hidden beast died, the regal jade spirit informed. The shadow's speed was so astonishing even Zen was unable to dodge it. One could not comprehend the speed of the hidden beast of stage 33. Fortunately, speed was what the Wing King was best at. Putting out the black flame saved the lives of other creatures. So putting out the black flame is the way to take care of these hidden beasts. Zen stared at the nearest lampstand. The dog ceased its roaring, but kept its focus trained on him. It's not yet time to extinguish the black flame, the regal jade spirit said worriedly. Try leaving this area first. The power of the gray bite mark may work and I'm not sure if you can withstand it, but you must try. The damage of the hidden beast was delayed. The cyan grasshopper was fine when it was bitten. It was only later that the damage showed itself and killed it. Zen was fine now, but what would happen later? Zen took the suggestion of the regal jade spirit. Follow me, he exclaimed to Elvinia. What? Elvinia blinked, clueless to what Zen had just learned about the lampstands. Without answering, Zen turned around and walked towards the gobi at the edge of the circle. The moment he stepped into the gobi, the hidden spirit lamps and the hidden beasts all disappeared. Then, at the same time, two powerful forces came at him, biting his arm and neck. Zen was well prepared for this. The chaotic source spirits were activated and they withstood the biting forces. Elvinia was very close to Zen and could not help but scream when she felt the explosive power from the gray bite marks. Zen's body shook violently before the bite marks disappeared completely. He heaved a long sigh of relief and let out, "Fortunately, I can handle it." Elvinia looked at him, bewildered, and asked, what was going on? Zen smiled and explained the story of the hidden spirit lamp and the hidden beast. On hearing this she said, "So if you're attacked too many times by those hidden beasts, they'll leave more and more gray marks which will surely kill you when they finally explode." Yes, Zen nodded. That was why the regal jade spirit had asked him not to put the flame out yet. He wanted him to test the power of the dog's bite and see if he could handle it now and understand it more. When Zen returned to the desert, the dog crawling stood up once more, trying to pounce on him. The corner of Zen's mouth curled up slightly, and his legs suddenly jumped with unparalleled strength. He charged towards the lampstand like a sharp darting arrow. WRRR. The dog pounced at Zen as usual. But this time he had calculated the dog's trajectory. As he rushed forward, he suddenly lowered his body and somersaulted on the ground. He hit the lampstand with a bang. It was extremely solid and almost unshakable, but his intention was not to smash it down. He jumped up and reached out to pinch the black flame. Swish, swish. The moment the black flame was out, the shadow of the dog froze in the air and remained motionless. Now it was an immovable shadow. Chapter 3185, Repeated Settlement. Zen let out a sigh of relief as he looked at the motionless shadow. According to the regal jade spirit, so long as the black flames on the lampstands were extinguished, then the hidden beasts would remain motionless. After making sure that the dog wasn't going to move anytime soon, Zen turned to Elvinia. Follow me, I'll extinguish the flames one by one, so we can pass through. Elvinia couldn't help but look at the motionless dog. Are you sure this hidden beast won't move again? She had understood just now that the hidden beasts killed warriors relying on delayed settlement and accumulation. If one got attacked by a hidden beast, the best course of action would be to leave the area to settle the damage. Consecutive, accumulated attacks were dangerous and could lead to a quick death. How could Zen not understand this? No matter how fast he moved, the hidden beasts would still land their attacks on him. If Zen could settle all their hits repeatedly, then it wouldn't be that hard for him and Elvinia to pass through this area. He wanted to ask the regal jade spirit for help, but the latter was unable to give him any answers. The situation was critical when we encountered the hidden spirit lamp. When the Wing King extinguished the flame, he took us deeper. I don't know if the hidden beast will move again, the regal jade spirit told him. Forget it then, let's just go inside, Zen said, giving Elvinia what he hoped was a reassuring smile. Before them were 3 lamps and each one had a hidden beast tied to its post. The shadows, shapes told them these were wolves. Zen confirmed the direction just now. Since the path before him was the shortest, he chose to challenge the lamp post directly in front of him. As he stepped forward, the wolves began to get restless, dragging the wicks and trying their best to pounce. Zen merely ignored the wolves on the left and right sides. They couldn't reach him and all he needed to focus on was the one in front of him. Woo! Sensing his nearing presence, the wolf howled and prepared to give Zen a full blow. When Zen noticed the wolf's movements, he took a decisive step forward and, as expected, the wolf suddenly pounced. This is an opportunity. Prepared for this sudden attack, Zen halted and dodged from the side. Whoosh! His speed was at the maximum, but the wolf was also surprisingly agile, quickly catching up to him. It twisted its body and clawed at his back, leaving behind a distinct gray scratch. Of course, it had no intention of only landing one hit. After it scratched Zen, the wolf snapped its jaws and attempted to bite off the man's head. Fortunately, Zen was able to snuff out the black flame before it got the chance to tear his head off. With the flame gone, the wolf froze in midair with its jaws open wide. I was scratched again, Zen muttered bitterly. The power of this wolf's claw is strong, Elvinia told him with evident concern on her face. Let's settle it first, okay. Having figured out the rules of these hidden beasts, the two of them felt much more relaxed. Zen then simply turned back towards the first lamp post and left the desert, enduring the scratch on his back. The wolf was stronger than the dog but not strong enough to tire out Zen's chaotic source spirits. However, the hidden beasts in the inner layer still worried him. Zen knew that the deeper they went, the stronger these beasts would be. If those in the innermost layer turned out to be powerful enough to leave Zen unable to withstand their attacks, then that was going to be a big problem for him. There was no way he was giving up though. He was already past the point of no return, so he simply entered the desert all over again. This time, a huge tiger awaited him. With his quick reflexes, Zen managed to get through this one unscathed. Next came a lion that was able to hit him twice, which forced him to leave in order to settle the claw marks on his body. The fifth hidden beast he faced was a slow rhinoceros and Zen didn't have any problem extinguishing its lamp. The sixth one, the seventh one, it was a cycle. He would go in, get a few scratches, and then withdraw for settlement. This went on for an hour before he finally arrived at the center of the desert. However, just when he and Elvinia thought that things had finally turned out in their favor, a depressing scene made their hearts sink to their stomachs. Elvinia pointed at something behind him. Zen, look. He had been so focused on dealing with the hidden beasts, so it had been Elvinia's job to look around. Zen turned to where she was pointing at and found the dog. It was originally motionless but slowly began to move as its extinguished lamp lit up again. This is the worst part, he sighed from exhaustion. As the lamps lit up one by one, he found his retreat effectively blocked, so there was no way he would be able to settle his injuries now. Elvinia wanted to grab Zen's hand and pull him all the way out. It wasn't too late to leave, but then she recalled just how determined the man was about all this. There was no way he was going to give up. I'll send you out first, he told her. The first desert was already so dangerous and the following grassland and round Gobi area would be even more so. Zen wasn't going to put Elvinia in that sort of peril, so he grabbed her hand and prepared to take her away. However, she wrenched herself away from his grip. My body may not be as strong as yours but I can still take a couple of injuries. She told him, I can help you extinguish the lamps. So long as the damage they took was in the range of their endurance, then going through this area wasn't going to be so terrifying. Elvinia had already made up her mind. If Zen was staying, then so was she. The man looked onto the path they still needed to traverse. We're going to have to be more careful from now on. A huge, gray bite mark was on Zen's chest after he passed through two more lamp posts. The hidden beast that had bitten him was huge and had a mouth so big that it could swallow him in one gulp. One could only imagine how powerful this gray bite mark would be after it was settled. As he pushed forward, Zen couldn't help but look back at the lamp posts he had once extinguished but were now all lit up again. There was no settling this gray bite mark. All he could do was let it accumulate on his body. Just as he thought about this, 3 green flames suddenly appeared at the entrance in the distance. Chapter 3186, The Second Way for Settlement. Although the green-colored flames were quite a distance away, Zen was still able to see them clearly. The flames took human shapes and wore sturdy armors. Green flames spurted out from all the parts that weren't covered by their armors. Noticing Zen's unusual behavior, Elvinia also turned and saw the 3 human-shaped flames. Her face turned pale in an instant as she caught sight of them. They weren't certain about the origins of the human-shaped flames, but even with their distance, they could still feel the tremendous power emanating from these creatures. Elvinia couldn't help but take a few steps back because of fear. Grr! A dragon-shaped hidden beast roared somewhere behind them. Extremely surprised, Elvinia lost her balance as she tried to quickly turn. Before she fell, Zen immediately held her waist and helped her regain her balance. Don't be afraid, Zen said softly as he tried to calm her. Elvinia nodded, though it was obvious that she was still in a state of shock. She actually had complete trust in Zen, but she just couldn't shake off her fear and anxiousness of being trapped between the hidden spirit lamps and the 3 unknown creatures. After calming Elvinia, Zen asked the regal jade spirit and number 9527 about the origin of the human-shaped flames. This time, both of them seemed to know the answer. They had enough knowledge about the human-shaped flames. These creatures are born in the flames. They belong to the element spirit race, the regal jade spirit answered. They are called the Moonfire Slaves. Among the members of the element spirit race, these creatures are very powerful warriors, number 9527 added. What's strange is that they usually appear in the higher stages. What are they doing here in stage 17? After listening to number 9527 and the regal jade spirit, Zen concluded, there's only one thing that could explain this: the element spirit race must have been informed of our arrival. You're right, it was the elephant man race, number 9527 replied. Back on the grassland, Zen surmised that the elephant man race was probably a group of spies for some large race. It seemed that his guess was indeed correct. Fortunately, though the Moonfire Slaves are very powerful, their strength has been greatly suppressed after they entered this stage. However, number 9527 paused abruptly. What is it? Zen quickly asked. Their strength might be suppressed, but they still have tremendous life energy. It would still be very difficult to kill them, number 9527 explained. Zen was still asking for more information about the Moonfire Slaves when the three human-shaped flames seemed to have already discovered them. I have a visual of the targets. The elephant men didn't lie, number 12 reported. But these hidden spirit lamps are hindering us, number 13 said as he looked at the lamp posts. Humph, how powerful can the hidden spirit lamps in stage 17 be? Hey, number 14, kill them, but remember to keep their hands intact, number 12 ordered in a stern voice. The Moonfire Slaves knew that the other shore key was on one of the hands of Zen or Elvenia. Their trip to stage 17 was for this very purpose. But, number 14 briefly hesitated. Before they had come down to this stage, they had also heard about its current situation. The place wasn't as simple as it looked. Moreover, the injuries inflicted by the hidden beasts were settled together. Number 14 thought that it probably wasn't a wise choice to rush things and act rashly. Don't be such a wimp. You won't die. Besides, I want to see the strength of these hidden beasts, number 12 argued. Or we can extinguish the hidden spirit lamps first, number 14 asserted in a low voice. Don't test my patience. Number 12 was getting annoyed at No 14's dilly-dallying. Despite his resistance, number 14 couldn't disobey No 12. Number 14 couldn't do anything but bite the bullet as he rushed towards Zen. Thump, thump, thump. Just as number 14 was close enough to the hidden spirit lamps, the hidden beasts that were tied to the lamp posts rushed to him right away. Giant dogs, wolves, tigers, leopards. Vicious creatures in various forms rapidly bit and clawed at number 14 continuously. The injuries caused by the hidden beasts weren't settled immediately, hence only leaving traces of gray scars upon the body of No 14. It actually took Zen an hour to go from the entrance to the center of the round desert. To get rid of the injuries that he had suffered, he needed to get in and out repeatedly, which was why it took him a lot of time. However, being pressured by No 12, number 14 rushed into the inner layer of the round desert, disregarding the injuries that would accumulate. In just a few seconds, the Moonfire Slave was just about 1,000 feet away from Zen and Elvenia. Stand behind me, Zen calmly instructed Elvenia. Not far from them, a huge dragon-shaped hidden beast was intently staring at them. Zen took about 2 steps forward while exercising full caution. At the same time, even at a distance of more than 1,000 feet, Zen could still feel the burning aura of the Moonfire Slave. The green flames that were oozing out from his body were terrifying, but there was no hint of fear in Zen's eyes. After all, he couldn't be harmed by fire. However, Elvenia was relatively weak against it. That was why Zen was determined to finish off the Moonfire Slave as soon as possible. As the Moonfire Slave got closer and closer, the heat waves being emitted were also getting stronger. Zen, it's so hot. I don't think I can take it anymore. Elvenia was in a total pinch as she had nowhere to go. The Moonfire Slave was getting closer in front, and the dragon-shaped hidden beast was just about a foot behind her. As the Moonfire Slave cut the distance of about 500 feet, Elvenia suddenly felt like her body was being cut by a knife and her hair was being engulfed by fire. She couldn't help but scream in agony. Upon hearing this, Zen gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. He couldn't wait anymore. He had to stop the Moonfire Slave from approaching further, or Elvenia would really be burnt by the flames. However, just as Zen was about to rush over, the approaching Moonfire Slave suddenly trembled and halted. Immediately after, an extremely terrifying force burst out from his body. The armor worn by number 14 was instantly shattered. His mountain-like body collapsed and his flames were extinguished. The broken armor scattered all over the ground. Is he dead? Zen was a little confused and stunned. As the scorching waves disappeared, Elvenia was finally able to breathe properly. There was a sigh of relief as she fixed her charred hair. How could he die all of a sudden? Elvenia asked as she caught her breath. His injuries must have been settled. Zen's face brightened up as he realized what happened. According to the regal jade spirit, if they were attacked by the hidden beasts, the injuries accumulated would only be settled after they retreated a certain distance. However, it seemed that there was more than one way for the injuries to be settled. No 14's framework was huge and he didn't bother dodging any attack made by the hidden beasts. As he rushed to Zen's location, several attacks from the hidden beasts accumulated on his body. I guess when the power of the hidden beasts' attacks reaches a fatal limit, it will be automatically settled, Zen told the regal jade spirit. That should be it, I agree. Number 9527 and the regal jade spirit affirmed Zen's deduction. In the distance, number 12 and number 13 were standing still. Their angry faces were outlined by the flames in their helmets. Really, only half the distance, and number 14 was killed, number 12 uttered in surprise. We can't take any more chances. We need to extinguish the lamps first before we chase them, number 13 urged. It was true that the Moonfire slaves were tough creatures. For now, number 14 had died, but they still had a way to bring him back to life later. Chapter 3187, Stop. Number 12 watched the two human beings in the distance. After thinking for a while, he finally said, let's put out the lamps. The element spirit race had initially sent out the Moonfire slaves in order to snatch the other short key from the two of them. It wasn't the Moonfire slaves' job to explore this dangerous place, or the temple in it. They figured it would be for the best if they stayed out of this dangerous place. However, now that they chased after them, it was inevitable that they had to enter that place. Having a large body, number 13 made a big stride forward and reached out to touch the first lamp stand easily. After all, each hidden beast's movement could only cover an area with the diameter of 200 feet. He pinched the black flame on the wick, extinguishing it instantly. However, being large in size also had its disadvantages. When number 13 stretched out his hands to extinguish the black fire, the surrounding hidden beasts attacked him. His arms were then covered in gray marks from this. No, 12. What should we do now? Number 13 turned around and held his arms up in front of No. 12. To extinguish one hidden spirit lamp, number 13 had to be attacked so many times. If he put out the flames of a few more lamps, the attacks that he would suffer would probably not be less than that of No. 14. After surveying his surroundings, number 12 said, it seems that the design of this place only allows creatures under 10 feet high to pass through. We need to shrink. The Moonfire slave was a kind of fire spirit. They could become large or small in size, even their armor adjusted to their size. Number 13 nodded. Immediately, the bodies of the two Moonfire slaves shrank. Their armor melted into a silver liquid. Finally, once the two had condensed to a height of roughly 10 feet, their armor solidified, fitting them snugly. Now that they were small, they were able to move more nimbly. Number 13 then took a step forward, his momentum causing a gust of hot wind. He was headed straight for the second lamp stand. They are going to catch up, said Elvenia, pursing her lips anxiously. There was no way she'd want them to get close again. She had already suffered enough from the first Moonfire slave. They won't be able to catch up soon, Zen said reassuringly. Let's continue moving forward. Anyway, there was no other way to go but forward. Although the Moonfire slaves were able to move faster now, they still weren't as fast as the hidden beasts. While extinguishing 4 lamp stands in a row, number 13 had still been attacked 3 times. Thinking of the ones he had already received when he had a huge body, he was a little worried. Once these injuries break out, I'll have to suffer a lot. Number 13 said anxiously, I'll retreat and settle them outside. If number 13 died here, number 12 would be forced to fight in person. Of course, number 12 didn't want that to happen. Waving his hand impatiently, he said, hurry up. Similar to what Zen did, number 13 retreated to the gobi outside the desert to allow the gray marks dotting his body to explode. After that, he rushed back to No 12's side. After number 12 and number 13 went deep into the group of lamp stands, they soon found that the method of leaving the area for settlement did not work anymore. The lights they had just extinguished were somehow lit again. They had no choice but to move forward. Zen had expected the Moonfire slaves would encounter such a problem. Not bothering to look back to check, he focused all his attention on the hidden beast in front of him. The hidden beast in front of him was a unicorn. Narrowing his eyes, Zen attempted to leap upwards, when the unicorn followed suit at incredible speed, stabbing its sharp horn into Zen's belly. Zen gritted his teeth but managed to reach out and put out another black flame. Staggering backwards, he checked his stomach to find more gray marks. These were probably going to cause him great suffering later on. Elvenia watched him inspect his scars. Her heart sank. Zen had incurred several wounds already, and she was worried his body would collapse if he settled them all at the same time. "Let me deal with the next lamp," Elvenia said firmly. Not far away, a hidden beast looking like a cat curled up on the ground. This hidden beast was obviously agile and nimble. If Zen didn't move fast enough, he'd probably incur yet another wound. "Don't worry," Zen shook his head. "I'll be fine." After saying that, he transformed into an arrow again and shot forward. Whizzing past the cat, he rushed to the lampstand ahead. However, as Elvenia expected, 2 more scratches appeared on Zen's body. This spiritual cat didn't seem to be large, but the 2 scratches it left were shining with silver-gray light, indicating they were serious injuries. The hidden beasts in the second half of the journey were much more powerful than those in the first half. This meant that the rest of the journey would prove perilous. Zen hurried on to pass through 3 more lampstands, each time incurring more wounds. At this point, even the regal jade spirit spoke. "Zen, if you get injured one more time, I'm afraid it'll be troublesome to settle the injuries." "What can I do? We can't turn back. I can only trust my luck now," Zen answered, as he eyed the hidden beast before him. It was a centipede with 12 pairs of wings. "I just thought about it and found that there seemed to be something wrong with the way to settle the injuries." Back then, when the cyan grasshopper received a fatal attack from the hidden beast in the 3 purities stage, the settlement didn't come immediately. Instead, it came after a while and the cyan grasshopper directly died, the regal jade spirit said. Zen was just about to rush to the lampstand, but upon hearing the regal jade spirit's words, he abruptly stopped in his tracks. Although Zen was persistent and brave, that didn't mean he wasn't afraid to die. Studying the gray scars that painted his body, he felt anxious. They were like ominous blades that hung over his head, ready to fall at any moment. According to the situation of that moonfire slave, the cyan grasshopper should have died on the spot, not after a while, said Zen slowly. "Yes," the regal jade spirit added, "the rules of the settlement are somewhat different from what I thought. However, the result is the same." Zen responded faintly. Although the moonfire slave's strength was suppressed by stage 17 of the other shore, Zen doubted he was stronger than them. "But think about it," the regal jade spirit pressed. "What if a person is seriously injured, and stays in this area the whole time?" Zen's eyes lit up. Was it the third method of settlement? "Are you saying the injuries will be settled when the time is up?" Zen asked slowly. "It's very likely." The regal jade spirit nodded confidently. If so, Zen whipped his head around to look at the moonfire slaves in the distance. They seemed to be in a worse predicament than him. Pondering over this for a bit, Zen decided to stop moving forward. If what the regal jade spirit had said was true, he would have to try staying put for a while. Seeing that Zen had stopped pressing forward, number 13 was overjoyed. This gave him renewed strength, and he proceeded to extinguish the hidden spirit lamps as fast as he could. He was getting close, but suddenly, studying the gray scars on his body, he hesitated to move forward. Chapter 3188, The Third Force. Although Elvenia agreed that she and Zen should stop, she was still highly concerned about the moonfire slaves' movements. Seeing that they stopped as well, she finally sighed in relief. They've stopped too. They can only withstand a limited amount of power. Zen found some relief in that as well. It didn't look like the moonfire slaves were about to catch up. But a few seconds later, they began moving forward once again. After number 13 halted, number 12 continued on. This strategy gave them a great advantage. "Now it's my turn," Elvenia called out without turning to Zen. While she couldn't use the chaotic source spirits in her current form, her corporeal body had refined a great number of body-strengthening jades. By no means was she weak. Before Zen could say a word, Elvenia frowned. "I'm not useless." She knew Zen didn't want her to help because he was worried about her safety, but she couldn't let him take on everything by himself. He needed her, and Elvenia was well aware of it. Swish! Elvenia flew over first. The centipede had been on guard against Zen, so Elvenia managed to find a good spot from far away. Even as the centipede reacted quickly, Elvenia managed to extinguish the black flame first. Then, she turned to Zen and said, "What do you think?" "Very good." He gave her a thumbs up. "I will go on then." Without pausing, Elvenia took a moment to observe the scene before rushing on to the next lamp post. Both of the two groups moved along the posts at the same speed, maintaining a constant distance between them. After some time, Zen felt a sudden vibration from the gray marks on his body. All the wounds he had gotten exploded simultaneously. He had absorbed a massive amount of body-strengthening jades, and the chaotic source spirits had almost reached the late stage. His physical strength far exceeded that of his peers. But when the gray marks on his body exploded, even he couldn't suppress the muffled groan coming out of him as he spat out a mouthful of blood. The power of settlement had exceeded the limit that the chaotic source spirits could bear, resulting in their fatigued state. But the truth of godly way had soon restored them. While they were only fatigued for a moment, the power they failed to bear caused much damage to Zen's body. Luckily, he had absorbed the 6-pattern blood-storing seed and transformed his body with the Chaos Ancient God's blood. Otherwise, the power would have been far too much for him. It's my turn. Since the gray marks had been settled, Zen could then replace Elvenia. In the process of extinguishing the hidden spirit lamps, 2 gray marks were left on her body. Her body wasn't as strong as Zen's. She was already lucky enough to have managed to survive them. Fortunately, by then, they had already finished 4/5 of the way. The exit to the circular desert wasn't far away. With Zen's speed, he could leave the Moonfire slaves far behind him. At the bottom of the flat gobi were long, narrow caves, widely distributed across the area. Over 10 huge mice were running wildly within the caves. They were the extremity mice, the natives of stage 17. Some time ago, the ear mice wanted to join them in the hopes of being recognized as their distant relatives. But the extremity mice completely ignored them. Over 10 extremity mice left the caves and arrived at the edge of the desert. Squeak! They're all inside now. The 3 Moonfire slaves are in there too. Hurry up! Scattering in all directions, the extremity mice began drawing an array on the ground. The creatures cooperated rather well with each other. In less than 5 minutes, a great magic array appeared on the gobi. One mouse pulled out a circular crystal. Under the light's reflection, it could barely even be recognized as a ball, but in the shadow, the ball disappeared, as though it didn't exist in this world. After the object was positioned right in the center of the array, the ladder was activated. Unlike the rest of the arrays that were glowing brightly, this one disappeared the moment it was activated. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Masters in the void, come quickly. The leading mouse called out. Just then, an invisible wave shot down from the sky. Bang! The moment the invisible wave hit the ground, the south of stage 17 shook violently. The mice surrounding the array were all sent flying. 2 red balls of light appeared in the very center of the array, each surrounding a faint, human-shaped shadow. Squeak, squeak. Masters, here you are. Masters, some people are trying to enter the temple. Squeak. By now, the extremity mice were speaking over each other. That's why you summoned us. A cold voice came from one of the balls of light. Squeak. Those 2 are not ordinary folk. The element spirit race has even sent out the Moonfire slaves. Another one of the mice chimed in. Moonfire slaves. If they are involved, the 2 must be truly unusual. Did they have the other shore key? In the past, they had tried their best to fight for the temple but to no avail. It was because of the other shore key that they failed. Maybe. Masters, you must hurry, they've been in there for too long. The extremity mouse said urgently. Like the elephant man race, the extremity mice were stationed there to monitor the temple. The 2 figures in the red balls of light took one look at each other before gliding toward the entrance to the circular desert. Seeing their masters enter the desert, the extremity mice all squeaked. Hundreds and thousands of them then surged out of the caves. They gathered around the 2 red balls of light like tidewater, and followed the masters into the desert. Whoosh! Zen's figure was more like a bolt of lightning than a person as he flew to the side of the lamp post and extinguished yet another black flame. When he looked up to the front, he finally felt a sense of relief. The desert's exit wasn't too far away. He only needed to deal with 3 more lamp posts. Only 2 gray marks covered his body. The larger the size of the hidden beasts, the stronger their strength. But even they couldn't keep up with him, so passing was no big deal to him. The 2 Moonfire slaves had already passed through the middle of the desert. When they reached the disassembled Moonfire slave, they stuffed No 14's armor and spiritual core into their pockets. It was the spiritual core that served as the Moonfire slave's foundation. So long as it was intact, they would never fall to their death. Continuing forward, they saw the entrance of the desert suddenly flash with a crimson light, from which 2 blood-red balls of light appeared. The objects carried a special aura. From the moment they entered the desert from the gobi, Zen was drawn to them. Chapter 3189, The White Mist. Fortunately, Zen's judgment was quick. As soon as he saw the red balls of light, he immediately deduced that they weren't weak compared to the Moonfire slaves. At the same time, he felt that the regal jade spirit's emotions had fluctuated wildly. He sensed that there was some kind of uncontrollable anger. "That's the Nihility race," said the regal jade spirit. The regal jade civilization was known for their intimidating aura, back when they first set foot on the other shore. In a short period of time, they had become one of the top 10 civilizations, and the Wing King had become a highly important and powerful existence on the other shore. However, due to the conflict with the Nihility race, they had no choice but to hide under the black pool of the dark region at stage 13. From that scenario, one could imagine the opposition between the regal jade civilization and the Nihility race. "They are of the Nihility race. Why do they look like the element spirit race?" asked Zen. He continued to study the red balls in the distance. Inside the iron house in the energy vortex, the shape-shifting spirit had once transformed into a circular ball, which was the form of an element spirit. The Moonfire slaves descended from the element spirit race, but the two red balls looked more like the element spirit race than the Moonfire slaves. Humph, the Nihility race is not a civilization. They are a group of creatures that believe in the Nihility way. Or rather, they are the traders from different races, the regal jade spirit sneered. There was a clear and obvious resentment in the regal jade spirit's voice at the mention of the Nihility race. "I see," Zen simply nodded. He never expected that breaking into this place with the other shore key would alert all those powerful beings from the upper stages, one after another. Meanwhile, the two Moonfire slaves also noticed the two red balls at the entrance. "Two Nihility spirits. They are traitors," number 12 said coldly. "Are we going to get rid of them?" number 13 asked. Naturally, the element spirit race did not tolerate traitors. If they ever came across any betrayers from their race, they would fight them to the death. "Forget it. It's more important to get the other shore key. Go wake up No. 14. Use my stardust to recover his strength," number 12 commanded. Their original plan was to return home after they had obtained the other shore key, and then awaken No. 14. But now that the Nihility race was there, not only did they have to get the other shore key, but fight against the Nihility spirits as well. In addition, they had no choice but to wake up number 14 right then and there because they needed help. However, they had to consume the extremely precious stardust in order to do so. In turn, number 13 hurriedly took out the spiritual core. "Don't worry and don't be too anxious. Those two Nihility spirits won't be able to catch up with us so soon," number 12 consoled. In any case, the hidden beasts would be in the Nihility spirit's way and that would buy them some time. Before number 12 could finish speaking, they suddenly heard an extremity mouse squeak. Then, the extremity mice swarmed the lamp posts. Although the hidden beasts tied to the lamp posts were powerful, they were alone and did not have any help. They wouldn't stand a chance against the huge number of extremity mice. Furthermore, even if the power of settlement could kill dozens of extremity mice, more and more mice would still come. Swoosh! At that moment, countless extremity mice rushed towards the hidden spirit lamps and extinguished the black flames with their own bodies. Afterwards, they immediately headed to the next lamp posts without any hesitation. 1 lamp post, 2 lamp posts, 3 lamp posts. The black flames on the lamp posts swiftly died out, and the two Nihility spirits moved forward smoothly. They were so fast that their speed was more than 10 times faster than Zen's and the two Moonfire slaves. Zen was slightly shocked when he saw how quickly they moved. At such a rate, it would only take them 5 minutes to pass through the circular desert area. However, he shifted his focus on dealing with the hidden beasts in front of him. After he passed by 3 lamp posts, he finally reached the edge of the desert and arrived at the annular grassland ahead. The two connected circular areas were like two different spaces. Zen and Elvenia stepped onto the grassland, and then disappeared without a trace. At the same time, number 13 continuously sprinkled the stardust onto No 14's spiritual core. Once number 14 had absorbed enough stardust, green flames burned from the spiritual core and eventually transformed into No 14's body. Even the originally broken armor was also restored piece by piece. After number 14 regained consciousness, he saw the 2 red balls that moved in the distance. "Well, why are there 2 Nihility spirits?" number 14 asked. "Ready to fight," number 12 answered. The sight of the Nihility spirits that moved forward effortlessly with the help of the extremity mice made number 12 very upset. They had to kill the 2 Nihility spirits before they fought with the 2 humans for the other shore key. Yet, the 2 Nihility spirits had no intention of approaching the Moonfire slaves. They moved a distance, and then directed the extremity mice to make a detour, which meant that they bypassed the area where the Moonfire slaves were. To add salt to the wound, the figure in one of the red balls even made a provoking gesture to the Moonfire slaves before it left. In the end, the 3 Moonfire slaves could do nothing but watch the Nihility spirits surpass them. They had no choice but to extinguish the lamps one by one. On the other hand, Zen had entered the second circular area, and the gray marks on his body were automatically settled. Although the power of the settlement was quite intense, he could still bear it. Besides, he didn't have time to think too much now. The Nihility race would soon catch up. Let's go. He quickly slipped his arm around Elvinia's waist. Lightning flashed on his back, and they flew up in the air in no time. From the outside, he saw that there was no difference between the grassland in the ring and the one in the south. When they stepped into the ring, however, he found that the grassland there was shrouded in a thick white mist. Although he knew that he should be wary of the strange white mist, he didn't want to stay at the entrance any longer. In the next moment, his thunder wings flapped and they flew forward in a straight line. If there were no obstructions, it would only take a few seconds for him to cover this distance. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. At that point, the thick, milky white mist blocked the 2 people's eyesight. Now, Zen had traveled forward for dozens of seconds already. At his speed, he was able to fly back and forth about 4 times within the area, but he still couldn't pass through the white mist. What's going on? Elvinia asked in confusion. There's something wrong. We are not moving forward, Zen said with a frown. I'm afraid it's not that easy to pass through this area, Elvinia answered and shook her head. Overall, Elvinia had been an invincible being on the other shore ever since she got the body of the purified being. Even the creatures in the dark region couldn't do anything to her. Despite that, the first area of the temple had been so dangerous, let alone the second one. As a result, she became more curious about the temple. What kind of civilization had set up such a space and built the temple? What exactly was hidden inside the temple? As for Zen, what he currently thought about was how to pass through the area they were in. He flew forward for a distance, and then descended from the white mist. He had flown so close to the grass that was a few hundred feet tall. Thus, he should be able to leave the mist very soon if he descended like the way he did now. However, after he came down vertically from a height of over 10,000 feet, the place below him was still covered in white mist. He couldn't get to the bottom. Of course, Elvinia also realized that there was an endless void below them, and she couldn't help but hold on to Zen more tightly. Chapter 3190, Help. In reality, the white mist was only a huge illusion. At that point, Zen began to long for the Eye of Will. After all, even if the Eye of Will's power wasn't that strong, the theurgy it had was very useful. The authentic visual world could help him see through almost all illusions, but unfortunately it was burnt when Zen had fought the evil god. The second he stopped moving, the white mist behind him surged forward. The white mist swirled until it formed the shape of a human being. The human-like mist held a large saber in one hand, and hacked towards Zen's head. Swoosh! The white mist had appeared so suddenly that when Zen realized what happened, the saber was already way too close to him. In a moment of desperation, he subconsciously reached out his hand to protect himself. Bang! The saber's power formed from the white mist was quite sharp. He felt the chaotic source spirits in his body shake violently when it struck his arm, and the impact had caused half of his chaotic source spirits to be consumed. So powerful, he exclaimed. In turn, he flew backwards with his arms around Elvinia and kicked the human-shaped mist. He thought that since the human-shaped mist could execute such a strong saber strike, it must be extraordinarily powerful. He didn't expect that his light kick would cause the human-shaped mist to disperse. This is bad, he thought. His thunder wings flapped once more, and then he flew half a foot upward. The human-shaped mist attacked from the other side this time. Luckily, Zen was quick to react, managing to dodge. If the saber hit him again, the chaotic source spirits would most likely get exhausted once more. When he avoided the second strike, Elvinia also seized the opportunity and quickly grabbed the human-shaped white mist. At that moment, the human-shaped white mist was destroyed. The moment the human-shaped mist dissipated, Elvinia immediately yelled, "Zen, up there!" Since Zen had no time to analyze the situation, he just blindly grabbed above him and crushed the mist once again. But just as the mist dispersed, it escaped from behind. Clatter, clatter, clatter. The human-shaped white mist with the saber repeatedly appeared and disappeared, but Zen and Elvinia didn't stop at all even though they could not communicate. About 5 minutes later, the white mist finally disappeared. Both of them gasped for breath. They had consumed a lot of their physical strengths in their last fight. Completely defeated? Elvinia asked. I'm not sure, Zen said with a shake of his head. As soon as he finished speaking, another 3 human-shaped mists appeared around them. Each of them had a different weapon, one had a sword, the other held an axe, and the last one wielded a spear. Upon seeing them, Elvenia couldn't help but panic on the inside. One human-shaped mist had already made Zen exhausted. Now, 3 of them would surely cause him great trouble. Meanwhile, Zen's eyes slightly narrowed into slits as he gently held Elvenia up. In only a few seconds, his body changed and quickly grew 2 more heads and 4 more arms. Swoosh, 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 the 3 human-shaped white mists finally pounced towards him. It was true that they were strong and fierce, but their bodies were immediately destroyed the moment he touched them. Once he had understood their situation, he ignored their weapons and wrecked their bodies before they attacked him. His 3 heads could see and hear attacks from any direction. To be honest, he had an easier time dealing with the 3 human-shaped mists now compared to the single human-shaped mist earlier. 5 minutes later, the 3 human-shaped white mists disappeared again. But before he could sigh in relief, another 9 human-shaped mists appeared. Just like before, all of them held different weapons, such as saber, spear, sword, halberd, axe, and so on. After he had observed all the weapons in their hands, he thought for a while first. He thought of the illusion that the snake goddess had shown him. His grandfather, also a member of the human race, was known as the Lord of Weapons, and created the 9 Li race. Therefore, the weapons the human-shaped mists wielded should have also come from the memories of the 77th civilization, which was the human race. It seemed that the temple nearby was indeed related to the human race. When the 9 human-shaped mists appeared, Zen felt the pressure on him increase suddenly. As for Elvenia, she couldn't help much in fighting the fast and dense attacks. Bang! An axe was swung out from one side and hit Zen's arm. In return, the chaotic source spirits surged forth, while the truth of godly way quickly began to repair them. When the chaotic source spirits had just recovered up to 80%, a sharp arrow formed from the white mist flew towards him. The chaotic source spirits took the blow once again, and now only 30% of their strength was left. Before the truth of godly way could repair them, another large hammer came down at Zen. Boom! When the hammer crashed down, his chaotic source spirits were finally worn out. He had only sensed a white light flash at him, which felt like 5 bolts of lightning had struck him. Even so, he gritted his teeth and avoided the attack of the other human-shaped mists. However, his body trembled and he felt a little weak. Zen, let go of me. As Elvenia watched Zen fight, she decided that she wanted to break free from his grip. Yet, she couldn't fly. Not only was she useless, but she was also a hindrance to Zen. However, Zen clearly knew that if he let go of her and let her fight the white mists alone, she would probably die. How could he listen to her request? Swish! He flew and left the area, but several human-shaped white mists followed closely like ghosts. Their attacks were unstoppable. In that case, he could no longer dodge. Just as the weapons were about to hit him, a red fist mark appeared on the body of each human-shaped white mist. Plop, 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 the fist marks exploded, and then the human-shaped white mists that surrounded him simultaneously dissipated. It was not easy to completely kill these human-shaped white mists. The first time Zen had dealt with one, he had repeatedly killed it for about 5 minutes before it disappeared forever. After a while, the white mists that had dispersed reappeared in a second and charged towards him. Plop, 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 plop. Another 9 red fist marks popped up on the chests of the human-shaped mists, and then they were crushed again. The human-shaped white mists ceaselessly reappeared, and the red fist marks destroyed them over and over again. Zen and Elvenia looked around in surprise. Of course, they wanted to know who helped them. However, the white mist was too thick to dissolve. Even if the helper was very close, they still couldn't see them. After each of the 9 human-shaped white mists was killed a dozen times, they were finally gone for good. Despite that, Zen and Elvenia didn't feel relieved. After all, both of them saw a red light in the white mist, which became brighter and brighter. Finally, it emerged out of the white mist and appeared in front of them. It turned out that it was one of the 2 Nihility spirits of the Nihility race. How dare you enter this dangerous place if you can't defeat the fog spirits? You 2 are quite bold, soft female voice came from the red ball. Zen simply frowned and did not refute, as what the Nihility spirit said was reasonable. Relying on his powerful physical body and the methods of the purified being, he thought that he could act recklessly in the dark region. He explored such a dangerous place without any knowledge. Overall, he was indeed a bit rash. But, why did the Nihility spirit save him? Chapter 3191, The Light. Zen and Elvenia stood vigilant, facing the approaching Nihility spirit. The Nihility way they followed was strange and made them difficult to predict. The red ball floated towards Zen and slowly came to a stop. Seeing it this close up, he saw that it was filled with bright red blood. A shadow in the shape of human became visible in the blood, and it slowly began floating out, stretching an arm through first. Zen and Elvenia looked closer to find a piece of white bone. As the bone left the ball, the blood in it seemed to boil and gather on the bone, turning into meridians and flesh. One moment the flesh was red and the next it turned white and tender. Then the skull, neck, chest and ribs emerged from the red ball as well. The blood began turning into the internal organs, eyes, ears, nose and mouth. In no time at all, a woman no less beautiful than Elvenia had materialized. I admire your courage very much. You were actually capable of luring the Moonfire slaves here. Do you have the other shore key to the temple? Asked the newly formed human woman. As she spoke, her gaze shifted to Zen's hands. Noticing the lines on his right hand, her eyes flashed as she reached out to grab it. Zen withdrew his hand lightning fast, remaining wary of this thing before him. The woman didn't seem bothered. She smiled and said, "There is no need for such caution. We are of the same race." "We are not of the same race as you," Elvenia retorted angrily. "You grew from bones." The woman froze at these words. She then smiled again and replied, "I may have grown from bones, but I'm still more human than a pig-faced monster." "You little..." Elvenia burned with rage. She had gained her body from a pig-faced monster. The human woman ignored Elvenia and got right to the point. "I'll give you two choices. The first is to submit to us and join the Nihility race. Then I'll escort you to the temple," she said to Zen. She was wise and experienced. She knew they were both purified beings, but they were obviously different from the rest. People like them bared the qualities necessary to join the Nihility race. "What's the second choice?" Zen asked blankly. Grinning, she replied, "I'll kill you and destroy you, leaving only your right hand." Zen's hand held the key to opening the temple. She had saved him and Elvenia for the sake of that hand. Few have the chance to join the Nihility race. Being one of us will allow you to see the truth of this world more clearly. What do you think? Below her waist were not legs, but a snake tail covered in scales. Could it be she was of the snake goddess race? Zen's heart skipped a beat as he contemplated the relationship between this woman, the human race and the snake goddess race. Seeing how close the woman was to him, Zen suddenly smiled and replied, "I refuse." Immediately, he wildly unleashed the power within his body. He held nothing back and punched her with all his strength. Boom! The punch sent a vibration spreading through her bones, turning her flesh into powder. But to his surprise, her bones were tough enough to take the blow and none was broken. "Let's go." The force of the punch sent Zen flying backwards, and he quickly darted into the thick white mist. The woman's bones returned to the red ball and became nothing more than a blurry figure. A piercing voice erupted from within the ball. "You're dancing with death now." The voice was so sharp and powerful that it reached Zen's ears quite clearly. "What if she catches up?" asked Elvenia worriedly, her eyes wide. "Do not fear her," Zen replied comfortingly. Since the woman had descended from an upper stage, her strength had been suppressed as well. It was possible she might not be able to defeat him. She had defeated the figures in the white mist with ease. But that didn't mean she was strong. All it meant was that she was familiar with this area and had been well prepared. Moreover, once the figures in the white mist were defeated, they didn't appear again. Zen was not afraid. As for joining the Nihility race, that was never going to happen. The second area is called the Mist-Killing Array. I have helped you remove the danger, but you'll have a hard time finding your way out. It's a great honor to be chosen by our Nihility race. Why are you refusing me? The woman's voice was sultry and hypnotizing. The souls at stage 17 would certainly be unable to resist. However, Zen and Elvenia were immune to it. They had absorbed a large amount of soul crystal and had reached the ultimate level of the indigo soul. "That woman's voice is so annoying," Elvenia complained. "Our top priority is to find a way out. We seem to be moving in circles," Zen said, frowning. There were no reference points in the white mist, so getting lost and losing a sense of direction were easy. Elvenia pursed her lips and considered their options. Right now, their resources on the other shore were very limited. "This is not the dark region. Your advantages as purified beings are completely useless against us. If you fall into the hands of the Moonfire slaves, your end will be much more miserable." The woman's voice came through the mist. "The light." A thought flashed through Elvenia's mind. Quickly, she said, "Light is straight. We can go along the light." This area was not large. If they found the right direction, they'd be able to pass through in the blink of an eye. As Elvinia finished speaking, she pinched her hand and flicked forward. A slender and long beam of light shot forward. Even in the vast white mist, the white light was a dazzling substance. Zen blinked his eyes, a hint of joy on his face. I didn't think of that. It's worth a try. Crack, he flapped the thunder wings on his back, turning into a flash of lightning and flying along the straight light. Not far away, the light was reflected in space, and a part of it deflected and shot in another direction. It seemed clear that Zen had gotten lost because something was wrong with this space. But this time he wouldn't follow the deflected light and instead flew forward in a straight line. Chapter 3192, No Route of Retreat. Previously, the world around Zen went by in a blur as he flew for a long time and lost his sense of direction. Now, he found the light that Elvinia had shot did not lead them to the exit of the circular area, but the right side of the said area instead. As soon as they arrived at the right side, they immediately calculated the direction. As Elvinia gently rubbed her thumb against her forefinger, another ray of light extended into the distance. This time, Zen flew fast along the ray of light. After a dozen seconds, the pervading white fog no longer surrounded them. It was clear that they had finally passed through. However, the woman in the red ball didn't expect that Zen would be able to get rid of the mist-killing array so soon, so she continued to persuade him. Of course, Zen did not respond to her. Instead, he left with Elvinia through the exit on one side of the circular ring, then they entered the last area, the flat gobi. The moment they entered the gobi, Elvinia pointed to the distance and exclaimed, "Zen, look." On the other side of the gobi was a huge temple. In addition, the location of the temple was exactly the same as Zen had predicted before. As he gazed into the distance, his eyes quickly fell on a statue in front of the temple. The statue looked tall and sturdy, and was dressed in luxurious clothing. Its face seemed to look confident. Zen had no idea who that was. Let's go. Because the Nihility spirits were quite familiar with the area, it wouldn't be difficult for them to pass through the mist-killing array. Naturally, it would be troublesome if those Nihility spirits caught up with them. Judging from how tough it was to pass through the first two areas, Zen was afraid that the gobi area at the end would give them a hard time, too. Since they had been drawn to the white fog while they flew, Zen and Elvinia decided that it would be best to walk through the gobi. Da, 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 the sounds of their footsteps echoed loudly in the empty gobi as they walked forward. Despite having traveled on foot, they moved quite fast. It was only after a blink of an eye when they arrived at the center of the gobi. Just as Zen had silently rejoiced about not being in danger anymore, he suddenly felt that the ground beneath him shook. Boom! A huge footprint suddenly appeared on the ground not far away. Boom! It wasn't long before a second footprint followed closely after the first one. There seemed to be a giant transparent beast in front of Zen and Elvinia. Based from the depth of the footprints, the beast's footsteps could definitely crush and kill anyone it stepped on. Step back, Zen shouted. When he felt a gust of cold wind press down on him, he grabbed Elvinia and abruptly jumped back. Boom! Another huge footprint landed on the area where they had just been. And a chill ran down Elvinia's back when she saw it. Strangely enough, the footprints stopped appearing when both of them retreated to the first half of the gobi. What was even more strange was that all the footprints in the gobi had vanished. Even the footprints as deep as an abyss were gone as well, and the gobi became flat once again. The footprints didn't follow us, said Elvinia. There seems to be an invisible giant. After a moment of thought, Zen said, "You stay here, while I try again." If he considered the size of the footprint, then the invisible giant shouldn't be that tall. He spread his wings and tried to travel through the area in the air. Crack, whoosh. When he had reached halfway through, he felt a strong wind blew over his head again. Swoosh. A huge creature came down from the sky, and then he felt that there was an invisible foot that immediately tried to press him down against the gobi. With gritted teeth, he quickly twisted his body and shook his thunder wings, then rolled out from the big foot's side. Boom! The second he jumped out, there was another huge footprint on the ground. Swoosh! Before he could fully come to his senses, a huge foot had stepped on his head. His brows knitted in annoyance while he flew forward as fast as he could. Every time he avoided a huge foot, he tried his best to fly higher. When he ascended a bit, however, a foot pressed down on him again. He went deeper and deeper, and the invisible feet followed him closely. It was true that in the beginning, he had guessed that there was a giant in the gobi. Unfortunately, the frequent stomping of the large feet made it clear that there might be hundreds or even 1,000 giants that had lined up to trample on him. As a result, his flying height lowered repeatedly because of the huge feat. He was afraid that he would be killed if he continued to fly forward with difficulty. Therefore, he stopped and retreated as soon as possible. Once he had left the area, the invisible feet disappeared, and the densely packed footprints were gone and filled in with the sand from the ground. Then, he stood next to Elvinia and lamented helplessly, "I'm afraid we can't break through this area." "I think there must be a way," Elvinia replied and looked around in hopes of finding a clue. Yet, the whole place was bare. How would they find any clue? Crack! Just then, Zen stepped on the ground with a bit of force. A part of the gobi under his feet shattered. "I'll try to pass through under the ground," he suggested. Although he knew that it was almost impossible to do so, he had no choice but to try, especially when they were chased after. Besides, their destination was right in front of their eyes. He would not give up easily. Suddenly, he heard that soft voice again that said, "Do not be in vain. How can you pass through the energy souls of heaven and earth in this area?" 2 red balls appeared at the gobi's entrance. The woman had been searching for a while in the second area, but she couldn't find Zen. Thus, she went straight into the third area, and saw Zen and Elvinia as soon as she arrived. The intrusion alerted Zen and Elvinia, and both of them quickly paled at the sight of the 2 balls. They didn't expect that they would catch up so soon. "I'll give you one last chance. Engrave these 2 marks into your bodies, and I can treat you as my own people. Otherwise, I can only kill you without mercy," the woman in the red ball declared. Right after the woman finished speaking, the blood in the red ball circulated, and 2 masses of blood floated towards Zen and Elvinia. Even though Zen didn't know what those masses were, he had a rough guess of what could happen if he absorbed them. He took a deep breath. There was no way he would submit to the Nihility race, so he would have to fight a hard battle today. "Kill us without mercy? Are you sure you're even qualified to speak to me in that way when your strength has been suppressed by stage 17? Zen shot back. His body emanated a domineering aura as he spoke intimidatingly. He knew that it was difficult to deal with Moonfire slaves and Nihility spirits, so he had tried to dodge them when he could. However, things were different when he had no route of retreat. "It's a pity to kill such a talent," the woman in the red ball sighed when she felt Zen's aura. At that point, she said to the Nihility spirit by her side, "Go ahead. Capture the man alive, while the woman could be killed." Immediately after, the surface of the 2 red balls began to fluctuate in circles. The minute they were about to take action, the Moonfire slaves suddenly appeared behind the Nihility spirits. As soon as number 13 arrived at the gobi, his huge body suddenly turned around and crushed a Nihility spirit under his feet. Boom! The conflict between the Nihility race and the Element Spirit race was unresolvable. They were mortal enemies. Of course, they would not hold back in each other's presence. Chapter 3193, Negotiation. The second number 13 stepped on the Nihility spirit, the green flames within his body streamed downward along his legs until they flowed onto the Nihility spirit beneath his feet. Splash! The green flames covered the surface of the red ball, effectively corroding it. The Moonfire slaves were created by the fire spirits of the Element Spirit race. The green flames that formed the Moonfire slaves' bodies were called the Magical Star Flame. The fire spirits of the Element Spirit race had a great control over the flames, and the Magical Star Flame could be considered to be the embodiment of the fire spirit's greatest achievement. Although the power of the Moonfire slaves was suppressed in stage 17, the power of the Magical Star Flame could not be underestimated. "Burn it to ashes. Ha ha." Number 13 pressed his heel down firmly on the red ball, and the green flames continued to pour forth. Although the surface of the red ball sizzled and sputtered under the heat of the Magical Star Flames, its inside remained intact. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Everyone present exchanged confused glances at the sound of 3 buzzes from within the red ball. Splash! A column of blood shot out from the red ball. The blood spurted out violently, and it formed the shape of a huge, bloody hand. Grabbing number 13, it raised him high and smashed him downwards so hard that the ground shook. Boom, boom. Every time number 13 was smashed into the ground, pieces of his armor fell off one by one. Gradually, the green flames within his body began to sputter out. Number 14, who was following closely behind, rushed towards the red ball as he screamed at the top of his lungs. However, before number 14 could even get close, another column of blood shot out from the red ball, also forming a giant hand. The hand grabbed number 14 before he even had the time to think. He too was being smashed violently into the ground. The 2 Moonfire slaves collided in a heaping mess of destroyed armor and deformed green flames. Even though the Moonfire slaves couldn't be hurt so easily, the energy of their spiritual cores was being exhausted as they were being smashed to a pulp. If this kept up, they would return to the state of the spiritual cores. As for the spiritual core of the Moonfire slave, it was difficult for ordinary other shore creatures to destroy it. In fact, these Moonfire slaves had died many times before and turned into the spiritual cores. Time and time again, they were rescued by the element spirit race, returning to their original state. However, the Nihility race had a way to completely destroy the spiritual cores. Boom, boom, boom. Just as the green flames on the bodies of the two Moonfire slaves were about to die out completely, a deep voice suddenly roared, "Stop!" Number 12 held up a red ball in his hand. 12 magical star flames with different shapes hovered next to him. Each magical star flame had a thin thread of fire drawn out, forming a unique array. This magic array was the magical explosion array, one of the most powerful methods of the Moonfire slaves. While number 13 and number 14 fought this Nihility spirit, number 12 had been busy subduing another one. Just when number 12 was about to finish off his opponent, he saw that his two subordinates were in grave danger. Left with no other choices, he took the subdued Nihility spirit as a hostage. If no 12's magical explosion array exploded, even the red ball wouldn't be able to protect the creature within. "Let her out of the array, and I'll stop." An enchanting feminine voice echoed from the ball that was holding the two Moonfire slaves with bloody hands. It was the same woman who had saved Zen before. With a slight nod from number 12, the 12 magical star flames were absorbed back into his body. Gently, he tossed the red ball onto the ground. Similarly, the two bloody hands released the two Moonfire slaves, and receded back into the red ball. A skeleton emerged from the inside of the red ball that had just attacked the Moonfire slaves. It looked relatively unharmed, but upon a closer look, some gray scars could be seen on it. What a pity! Zen shook his head in disappointment. He didn't like how this scene was playing out. If both sides had gotten terribly injured, this would have been a good thing. Conversely, if they stopped fighting with each other, this was bad news for Zen and Elvenia. As flesh and blood congealed on the skeleton, slowly, the figure of a human woman was formed. The other Nihility spirit that had just been held hostage quickly retreated behind the woman. "If you want to settle this," the human woman said coldly, "we would love to oblige you." The Nihility race and the element spirit race had been at war for the longest time. Most of the time, the element spirit race had the upper hand. They were usually able to subdue the Nihility race. Even so, the Nihility race had never backed off. To a certain extent, the element spirit race had no way of completely finishing off the Nihility race. Number 12 looked at the human woman coldly. "Sadly, I'm not in the mood to destroy you right now. My only goal is to catch that guy and take him back. It has nothing to do with you," he said, eyes narrowing. It was through the Elephant Man race that the Moonfire slaves knew about Zen's possession of the other shore key. Number 12 thought that the Nihility race knew nothing of this, so he was hoping he could divert the Nihility spirit's attention from Zen. "True, you catching him might have nothing to do with us," the human woman smiled slyly. "But he has the key to the temple, which has a great deal to do with us." No 12's expression darkened. After thinking for a while, he said, "Since everyone's goal is to get to the temple, why not we join forces for now? We can put our prior disagreements aside for the time being, and open the temple first." The three forces had spent a lot of time and energy in trying to open up this temple. Finally, the other shore key was within reach, so how could they possibly let go of this opportunity? "That's right. Just get that guy's hand first," number 14 chipped in. Just minutes ago, number 13 and number 14 had been badly beaten by the human woman. By now, they had replenished some stardust, enough for them to recover. The green flames that were sputtering out were now much more dense and lively. "Of course we will get that hand," another Nihility spirit said. "Humph, whoever gets it can possess it." Number 14 was the closest to Zen. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly strode towards Zen. Knock, knock, knock. Zen had been listening to their conversation. Hearing them discuss as though he were already dead made him furious. As number 14 headed towards him, a trace of killing intent flashed in Zen's eyes. The chances of him winning against two powerful races were incredibly slim. However, it just so happened that these two races were mortal enemies. He could use this against them and fight them with all his might. Just as number 14 was a few steps away from him, the wild god power within Zen's body suddenly erupted. Chapter 3194, A Safe Path. Previously, the Moonfire slaves had to make their bodies smaller and compact in order for them to pass through the first area. As soon as they arrived at the second area, their height of several hundred feet was quickly restored. Number 14 had a very simple and straightforward idea. He had planned on defeating Zen using sheer and brute strength. Afterwards, he would cut off Zen's arm that recorded the other shore key. The Moonfire slaves were known as the Element Spirit Race's slaves. Despite that fact, they still disdained and belittled the ants in the lower stages. However, things took an unexpected turn as soon as number 14 sped toward Zen. He noticed that Zen's body started to expand. Out of nowhere, one of his hands grabbed the Moonfire slave by his shoulder and threw a punch toward his chest with the other. Unbelievable. His hand. At this point, number 14 had forgotten to defend himself. He was utterly dumbfounded as he stared at Zen's hand in disbelief. The armor of number 14 became instantly disjointed around the shoulder area. As Zen extended his hand further, it sank even deeper into the Moonfire slave's shoulder. It was entirely enveloped by the magical star flames emanating from within his body. Everything would be reduced to ashes as soon as it came into contact with the magical star flames within his body. However, Zen's hand remained safe and intact. He couldn't quite understand how Zen managed to touch his body without getting burned. While number 14 was still completely bewildered, Zen had thrown another powerful punch toward his chest. Boom! The punch landed with a sickening crunch. The armor on No 14's back completely fell apart and got blown off. Upon impact with Zen's fist, the magical star flames inside No 14's body turned into a column of fire that spurted out from his back. At the same time, his spiritual core also shot out. It was almost impossible to break the spiritual core with brute force. This showed how much strength there was behind Zen's attack. Once the spiritual core left the Moonfire slave's body, the body would ultimately collapse. Splash! No 14's armor had scattered all over the ground. There were flames flowing everywhere. All that was left of his existence were bits of shattered armor pieces, flames, and his spiritual core. He had already collapsed before in the annular desert area wherein a large amount of stardust was consumed before he had recovered. And now, he had collapsed once more under the might of Zen's blow. The magical star flames flooded the ground and were gushing everywhere. Because of this, Elvinia was forced to fall back. While she was retreating, she felt utterly astounded at what she had witnessed. She had no doubt that Zen would be able to hold out against a Moonfire slave. However, she knew it wouldn't be that simple. How was he able to defeat him with just a punch? Meanwhile, Zen himself was a little confused as well. He was surprised at how he managed to put a lot of damage to the Moonfire slave. It was well known that the most important thing in the body of the Moonfire slave was the spiritual core. With that said, the spiritual core was usually wrapped in the magical star flames. When battling a Moonfire slave, there were very few opponents who dared to penetrate the magical star flames and take the spiritual core away, because if they did, they would definitely get burned to a crisp. When facing some formidable opponents, the Moonfire slaves would allow their spiritual cores to wander constantly all throughout their bodies. They would not let the most important part of their bodies stay in the same place all the time. Nevertheless, number 14 was reckless. It never crossed his mind that Zen could become that huge and wouldn't be afraid of the magical star flames. Whoosh! Da! 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 The spiritual core flew for a few miles and fell directly on the goby. It rolled directly in front of No. 12. I have the other shore key right here. Who else dares to take my hand away? Zen said coldly as soon as he came to his senses. The Moonfire slaves and the Nihility race were maintaining a balance. Zen had to let them know that it wasn't that easy to take him down. If they lost, they would be devoured by their opponents. Number 12 bent down and took the spiritual core in his hands. He looked perplexed as he gazed at Zen. The woman inside the red ball also frowned. It seemed incredulous to her that Zen was able to kill a Moonfire slave with just a single punch. Zen's actual strength was really way beyond her expectations. If she decided to attack him, the two other Moonfire slaves would surely take action immediately as well. After weighing out the stakes, the woman broke into a smile. I have to admit, I was very much mistaken. You are indeed very powerful. Who else will dare to take your hand? I think it is better if we go through this dangerous place and open the temple together. What do you think? Number 12 remained silent. He was fully aware of their current risky situation. The three parties still had the power to fight each other. Eventually, only one party would benefit from this. Their best option was to avoid any unnecessary battles and just open the temple together. Humph! Zen grunted begrudgingly. He decided to come and open the temple because he wanted to go inside it with Elvinia. However, he had not foreseen that the temple had already been targeted by the Nihility race and the Element Spirit race. It was clear that this temple was very important. Zen disliked the idea of the moonfire slaves and nihility spirits getting inside the temple. On the other hand, the woman was quite patient. She waited calmly for Zen's answer. Given the strength that Zen had displayed, he was truly qualified to become the third force of this place. However, he had no other choice. He had to agree to her suggestion. Since you don't decline my offer right away, it means you are agreeing to my suggestion. Well then, let's just bury the hatchet and become allies, said the woman as she withdrew inside her red ball again. The two nihility spirits began slowly drifting towards the center of the gobi and led the way. After putting away No 14's spiritual core, number 12 glanced once again at Zen. Afterwards, he walked off together with No. 13. Zen knew that it was difficult to escape this situation now. Nevertheless, he had no intention of escaping. He really wanted to open the temple. In addition to that, with the nihility spirits and the moonfire slaves leading the way, he knew it would be much easier to pass through the gobi. As soon as the red balls arrived at the center of the gobi, they halted and the woman came out again. She stretched out her hand. Then, she gently and cautiously probed the air ahead of her. As her soft fingertips touched a certain area, the space in front of her became distorted. Instantaneously, an invisible force left a huge footprint in the middle of the gobi. Boom! The footprint appeared right in front of her. It was only a few inches away from where she stood. The energy soul of heaven and earth is very powerful. Once it is formed, it will be indestructible for a very long time. Many of the temples found in stage 31 are guarded by it, explained the woman. It seemed like she was saying this to Zen. However, it also has a huge flaw. Anyone who enters it will be attacked indiscriminately, added the woman as she slowly opened her hand and gently blew on it. As she did this, a blood-red mist gradually dispersed from her palm. The mist contained a faint energy. As soon as the mist drifted forward to the distorted space, a strange scene occurred. Huge invisible feet stomped down from above and began attacking the blood mist. However, the blood mist was formless. Therefore, the huge feet weren't able to damage at all. This area is heavily guarded by the energy soul of heaven and earth. In any case, there should be a path around here that would allow us to safely pass through it. The path avoids all the attacks of the energy soul. Normally, it can't be seen clearly by the naked eye. But while the energy soul is attacking the blood mist, we will be able to see it, she continued. Boom, boom, boom. As the attacks continued, the blood mist was able to outline the countless footprints that appeared beneath it. Among these seemingly messy footprints, a winding path was exposed. There were no giant footprints along this path. Obviously, this was what the woman had mentioned earlier. Chapter 3195, Meeting Chiyu's statue again. Zen couldn't help the burst of admiration that flooded his heart as he stared at the path flanked by countless footprints. If the red mist hadn't lured out all these footprints, he would have never seen it. The human woman whispered something to another red ball and Zen watched it zoom straight onto the path. This way please, she said to him with a smile. The path was winding and zigzag. If she entered first, Zen might flee behind her. There was also the possibility of the moonfire slaves abducting him. Zen and Elvinia looked at each other with alert, but they still stepped on the path in silence. The human woman originally wanted to walk behind Zen and Elvinia, but number 12 beat her to it, shrinking his body and situating himself behind them. The fight had ceased on the three sides, but they still remained on guard against each other. Since it didn't really matter, the human woman chose to just let it be and settled herself at the very back. Boom, boom, boom. Thunderous footsteps echoed around them as invisible feet stomped on both sides of the path, trampling the gobi into pieces and only leaving the path they were walking on intact. This winding path wasn't long, and with the red ball leading them, they were able to pass through in just about 3 minutes. As the human woman walked out of the path, she drilled out the red ball, placed her palm on her lips, and sucked in the air. Whoosh, 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 all the red fog got sucked into her mouth. When it disappeared, the energy soul stopped attacking and the messy gobi resumed its original form as if nothing happened at all. You can open the temple now, the woman said to Zen indifferently. Zen nodded and walked towards the temple gates. The temple wasn't small by any means. Zen considered it very large in comparison to the ones he'd seen. As he stared at the gates, he couldn't help but gasp in shock. A huge part of the gates had been charred. Not only that, but there were also numerous scratches and irreparable damage on both sides of the gates. A lot of effort had gone towards opening the gates, Zen had no doubt about that. Is the temple so impenetrable? He asked. The damage it had taken was dire, but it didn't look as if it yielded at all. None of you can open it. As far as Zen knew, destroying a temple shouldn't be that hard. The Grand Sky Temple in Stage 13, for example, could definitely be opened with brute force if he was given enough time. Was this temple before him different then? After all, many powerful masters had descended from higher stages, trying to open it before. These masters came with their own methods, and it couldn't be that none of them ever succeeded. Zen's question was ignored by the Moonfire slaves, but the human woman smiled. Of course nobody could open it. What's the point in waiting for you then if it could be easily opened? She replied, many people have perished in trying to destroy this temple. A spirit king even met his end here. Back then, a spirit king from the element spirit race had come to stage 17. At that time, the race had personally brought a purified being into this place in hopes of invading the temple. Both the spirit king and the purified being died in the end. This piece of news was top secret within the element spirit race, and the human woman overheard it through a special channel. Now, she wanted to seize the chance to verify it from the Moonfire slaves. After all, the death of a spirit king was a horrible loss to the element spirit race. Cut the garbage and open the temple. One Moonfire slave snapped, glaring at her coldly. She let the attitude pass and continued to talk to Zen. This temple is extremely sturdy, but that's not the only reason why people can't enter. It is, in fact, possible to destroy it, but doing so will incite calamity and destruction upon those who try. A trace of fear crossed her features as she recalled what happened when the Nihility race had tried to get inside the temple. She had been an ordinary member of the Nihility race back then. Though she didn't have a high position, she was present in their attempt to invade the temple and witnessed the instant death of all the elites who were there. Zen nodded, taking her words to heart. There was definitely a reason why the temple stood here for countless years. As he walked to the gates, Zen could see a square stone that protruded in the center of them, engraved with stripes that corresponded to the lines on his palm. It was a peculiar feeling, finding the key to a door that had long since been unopened. The temple had been closed off for countless years, but now its secrets would finally be revealed. It was understandable for the Moonfire slaves and the human woman to be anxious. Elvinia, stay close to me, Zen muttered in a low voice. Elvinia nodded and quietly moved closer to him. Nobody knew what waited for them inside, but Zen knew that his life would only be valuable before he opened the gates. Once that was done, the temporary balance between them would break and chaos could ensue. They had to be on guard for this. With a deep breath, Zen stretched out his hand and pressed it upon the square stone. It was a perfect fit. Buzz! A ray of blue light suddenly emerged from the stone, extending along the entire surface of the gates. His arm tightened on the stone and the gates let out a dull sound. Rumble, rumble, rumble. As the gates opened, the Moonfire slaves and that human woman took a step back. That step back had been necessary because of the heavy wave of killing intent that suddenly washed over them. Although Zen had used the other shore key to open the gates, they remained on high alert. Zen, on the other hand, felt no fear. He didn't even bother assessing the situation before grabbing Elvinia and heading straight inside. The temple was dark, but the moment they stepped inside, golden dots of light appeared like fireflies and illuminated their way. As these dots of light appeared, numerous candles also lit up and illuminated the entire hall. Around 40 statues stood in front of them. Most were human-shaped, but a few were of strange forms. Zen's eyes were immediately fixed on the sixth statue from the left. This statue had a human body and a snake tail. It was a member of the snake goddess race. It wasn't surprising to find this statue in a human race's temple since both races were related by blood. However, the statue in front of them looked exactly like the snake goddess Zen had met in the Pear Hill. Seeing the snake goddess's statue here was one thing, but the one next to it confused Zen even more. There, in full glory with 3 heads and 6 arms, stood Chiyu's statue. Chapter 3196, A Powerful Statue. Although Zen had seen Chiyu's statue for many times, he had only seen Chiyu once. The Chiyu statue in front of him now was no different from those he had already seen before. Now that both the snake goddess and Chiyu's statues are here, does that mean Fuxi's and the Eastern Emperors will be here as well? As Zen thought about this, Elvinia gently tugged at his sleeve. Her eyes never left the statues, but it seemed as if she was focused on one of them, the statue that half knelt on the ground, with a sword in hand that pierced the ground. It was a statue of Eastern Emperor Tai. Why is father's statue here? Elvinia asked in a hushed tone. Zen squinted his eyes as he scanned through the statues before him. For everything to make sense, the divine farmers and the yellow Thyrchus statues should have been present too. However, Zen had never seen them in person, so he could only wonder if their statues were here. I'm afraid that the statue is not of Eastern Emperor Tai himself, Zen told Elvenia. It's not father? Elvenia asked, unconvinced that the statue was not her father. Right, Zen nodded. Since the snake goddess was willing to give Zen the 6-pattern blood-storing seed, she did not know of the other shore key in the seed, which also meant that she had no clue about the existence of this temple either. It was likely that the temple had stood there for such a long time, that it had survived through 1,000 chaotic eras. Naturally, it was impossible for Eastern Emperor Tai, Chiyu, Fuxi, or even the snake goddess, to set up their statues here inside this particular temple. If this is not father, who could it possibly be? Elvenia questioned, what on earth is up with this temple? She did not understand the origin of this round of chaos, leaving her pretty much in the dark to what was happening. On the contrary, Zen had learned a handful about the other shore in the chaotic eras from number 9527 and the regal jade spirit. Aside from this, he had also studied the origin of human beings from the snake goddess. In fact, the human beings in the current round of the chaotic era should not have existed at all. The fact was that they had been secretly and strategically placed there by the human beings from the other shore. When the snake goddess explained all of this to him, Zen couldn't help but have too many questions. Why was the snake goddess born to be the snake goddess in the first place? Why was Fuxi born to be Fuxi? Moreover, why were the Yellow Thirk, the Divine Farmer, Eastern Emperor Tai, Chiyu, and so on born to be themselves? When Zen saw the statues standing in the hall, he suddenly had answers to all of his questions. It all made sense. What he understood was that the snake goddess, Fuxi and the others had already existed in times of the 77th civilization. During that time, they were top masters of that era. But before they had finished the finale way, all of them entered the other shore and became human beings on the other shore. So when the seeds of humans were planted into the new round of chaos, it was most likely that they had prioritized their own clones. The clones were born to have powerful bloodlines, which was what made them so precious. This was why the snake goddess founded Pear Hill, why the Yellow Emperor founded the Bearing Race, and why Eastern Emperor Tai had won over all those humans in the world alone with a sword just to found the Oneness Sky Palace. I'm afraid the Eastern Emperor Tai here is the real Eastern Emperor Tai. Zen gestured at the statue. While your father might be his clone, Zen was quite sure at this point that this was the explanation for what happened. How could that be possible? Just as Elvenia was about to ask more questions, the Moonfire slaves and the Nihility spirits also rushed into the temple to see the statues for themselves. I can't believe the temple was opened so easily, said the human woman from the Nihility race, with shock in her tone. Bang, bang, bang. Just then, number 12 Moonfire slave entered and headed straight towards the center of the hall without speaking a word. Did you think you were quick? The human woman sneered at the Moonfire slave. With just a wave of her hand, the blood in the red ball quickly solidified and turned into a chain that she swung towards number 12. Boom! As the chain rolled out at around a dozen feet, number 13 stepped on it as if it were nothing. However, as if the chain were a living creature, it wrapped itself around No 13's body and tightened its grip. A sharp pain went through No 13's body and he winced in agony. While this was ongoing, number 12 had arrived at the center of the hall. At the center of the hall stood an independent statue that resembled the one outside the temple. This statue looked down onto the square stone platform in front of it, over where a blue book was floating. Since Zen and Elvenia had entered the temple, their attention did not ever leave the statues. Because of this, they had completely disregarded the floating book that number 12 had come for. Ha ha ha, number 12 chuckled, sending out a cold expression. He did not realize the value of the entire temple like the element spirit race did. But number 12 knew that bringing back something so valuable would get him promoted immediately. It was very likely that his status would jump from number 12 to number 1. But just as the Moonfire slave reached out to grab the book, the statue that had been reading it suddenly raised its head. The statue took a long look at the Moonfire slave, and then a confused expression spread across its face. This temple could only be opened by a human being, the statue said. How could you enter here? That is none of your business, said number 12, as he stretched out his hand to slap the statue. One slap could send a statue to pieces. However, number 12 failed to recall the similar statue that stood outside the temple. If the statue could be destroyed so easily, the Nihility race and the element spirit race would have shattered it by now. However, the one outside still stood firm and undamaged. When number 12 lifted his hand to slap the statue smiled. It then stretched out its finger and lightly tapped in the air. Pop! Just like that, a cracking noise echoed from inside the hall. No 12's tall and sturdy body stiffened in fright. A spiritual core rolled out from his right shoulder, which turned into powder as it rolled down. Splash! The spiritual core was broken, which meant that the Moonfire slave was completely destroyed. His flaming body evaporated, leaving his armor clamoring as it fell to the ground. The spiritual core is broken. Number 13 that was watching their exchange couldn't help but be frightened. Historically, it was very difficult to kill a Moonfire slave. This was because their spiritual cores could not be destroyed just by ordinary means. The perfect example of this would be number 14, who had died twice yet could revive himself with stardust. It was notable that the statue killed number 12 so easily. But the statue didn't stop the killing after getting rid of no. 12. Alien races are not allowed to enter the temple, it muttered. Whoosh, whoosh. Suddenly, 2 invisible beams of light emerged from its fingers. As much as number 13 wanted to run away, he did not have enough time to do so. The light pierced through his body and shattered the spiritual core inside. The magical star flame that formed his body immediately extinguished. At the same time, another beam of light shot right into the body of a nihility spirit that was close by. Chapter 3197, Test. Aside from the nihility spirit being actually strong, the red ball that was wrapped around their body was also extremely powerful. However, that ray of light which possessed an immense penetrating power, had actually pierced through it without any problems. Phew, once the ray of light punctured the red ball broke like a water tank and its shattered pieces flew in all directions. Bright red blood gushed out next, and inside the red ball floated a strangely shaped skeleton. The skeleton clearly was not in the human form. Jasleen, the human woman screamed. She was utterly shocked when she saw that her companion was killed so suddenly. Based from what the statue said, Zen understood that only humans were allowed to enter the temple. In addition, the statue was highly goal-oriented and clearly knew its targets. At first it killed number 12, and then number 13, and finally that nihility spirit. As for this human woman, she was probably related to the human race. Specifically, she was most likely a member of the snake goddess race, so the statue did not attack her. Despite that, she remained frozen at her spot and didn't dare to move at all. Even Zen and Elvinia were stunned when the statue's fingers released those rays of light. They thought that the statue that stood in the middle of the hall was a real one made of stone. How could it be a sentient being with such great power? The stone statue raised its head to look at Zen, Elvinia, and the human woman. I thought it was the inheritors of the 39 heroes who came, but I didn't expect that none of you or any of them, the statue said in an aloof voice. At the words, 39 heroes, the human woman's vision darkened slightly, while Elvinia was confused, and Zen's eyes flashed. Zen had counted all the statues and there were exactly 39 of them. Master, he exclaimed. Then, he quickly cupped his hands towards the statue. Don't call me master, the statue shook its head. I'm just a soul puppet who can only follow the orders of my former master, he added. Generally speaking, such a puppet only had a small memory of its former master. In addition, it was considered inferior to a soul fragment like No. 9527. Its eyes stared at the human woman as it continued, that is why even I know that she is a traitor, I can't do anything to her. The human woman had been very nervous. She originally came from the human race, but she betrayed them and joined the nihility race. Naturally, she was afraid that the statue would eliminate her. When she heard the statue's words just now, she immediately sighed in relief. She has a human body but a tail of a snake. Can she even be considered a human? Elvinia huffed. She was not convinced. In the source world, the snake goddess race and the Pear Hill were not humans, but they were closely related to the human race. Furthermore, there was a considerable number of humans who lived in the Pear Hill, including the human sovereign, Fuxi. Therefore, they were still considered a human force most of the time. The snake goddess has the same origin as humans, so of course she could be considered a human, the statue said calmly. After the statue was finished, Zen continued to ask, are the 39 heroes you mentioned the masters of the 39 statues in this hall? Yes, the statue nodded. Are they still alive on the other shore? Zen asked again. He had previously promised King Manard that he would help him search for the human race on the other shore. In theory, the other shore human race should exist on the other shore. After all, they were the one who had spread the seeds of the human race in the present chaotic era. Of course they are, the statue answered confidently as it eyed the human woman, then added, your nihility race have been looking for them for a long time. Unfortunately, you haven't found anything so far, right? The human woman remained silent. Ever since she had joined the Nihility race, she had chosen a path that she was completely uncertain of. In any case, there was no right or wrong when it came to choosing among the Purge way, the Finale way, and the Nihility way. It was just that different people chose different ways to follow in order to pursue the goal they wanted to achieve. She had her own pursuit, and that was why she stood on the opposite side of the human race in the end. Can you tell me where they are now? Zen asked again. This time, the human woman said, of course, they remain hidden on stage 33. How can they have a foothold elsewhere? The metal spirits, wood spirits, water spirits, fire spirits and earth spirits would never let the human race have an easy life. The element spirit race was known as the most powerful civilization on the other shore. They opposed the human race and even many other civilizations. Most civilizations hid on the other shore. What happened after they had climbed up and reached the stage 33 was either they chose to endure, or to submit. Although the element spirit civilization is powerful, how can it be that strong? There are still other powerful civilizations on the upper stages, Zen said with a frown. Even if the element spirit civilization was the strongest civilization on the other shore, there were over 1,000 other ruling civilizations, large or small, that existed in the same place as them. Besides, although some civilizations had disappeared or hidden like the Regal Jade civilization, they wouldn't possibly let the element spirit civilization monopolize the other shore. According to the information the Regal Jade spirit had given, all of the 10 great civilizations were exceptional. A small smile graced the human woman's face, as if she meant to mock Zen's ignorance. What you just said was the situation a long time ago. Indeed, that was the case hundreds of chaotic eras ago, but now, there are only a few forces that can contend against them. And we, the Nihility race, are one of them. You can consider joining us, she suggested. When Zen had killed a Moonfire slave, she was very impressed and that aroused her interest in him. There are only a few that can contend against them, Zen muttered. Suddenly, his gaze froze. Yes, the other civilizations are either forced to join the Blood Assembly, or have completely disappeared from the other shore, the human woman said with a nod. The Regal Jade civilization had hidden on stage 13 for a long time, and the situation on the upper stages of the other shore had undergone drastic changes within the span of these hundreds of chaotic eras. Thus, the real situation now was plainly different from what Zen had known. The current element spirit race was even stronger than what Zen and the Regal Jade spirit had imagined. In the same way, the power of the Nihility race was no longer what it used to be. It had become one of the few big races that could fight against the element spirit race. The statue just listened nonchalantly to the conversation between the human woman and Zen. Once the human woman was finished speaking, it said, of course I know of the hero's whereabouts, but if you want to know, I will tell you when you pass through there. Then, it pointed towards the ground not far away. A starry pattern appeared on the ground. There was a faint space fluctuation in the pattern, as if it was another world. Is this a test? Zen asked. Yes, the statue said with a smile. The human race had built the creation myth temple with all their might and resources. Those who have betrayed our race may not be able to pass the test so easily, it explained. Up until now, Zen didn't know why the human race had hidden the other shore key in the 6-pattern blood-storing seed, but they might have their own plans. It would be too simple and laid back if the temple recognized any human who appeared in this place. Therefore, he wasn't surprised that there would be a test. Let's go. He obviously wasn't afraid of the test the creation myth temple had given. Meanwhile, Elvinia followed him without hesitation. On the other hand, the woman from the Nihility race only looked at the starry pattern not far away, her eyes filled with doubt. She wasn't sure if the statue said that to threaten her or just to frighten her. It was easy for her to enter recklessly, but if she wanted to leave safely, perhaps it wouldn't be that easy. Chapter 3198, The Erexus Test. The human woman only hesitated for a moment before she finally made her decision. This temple was the last fortress of the human race. It had stood on stage 17 of the other shore for so many years, and was never once explored. Naturally, she would never let go of such a rare opportunity. She gently nudged forward from inside of the red ball. Her snake tail swayed as she followed closely behind Zen and Elvinia. Now, Zen was the first one to step on the starry pattern. The pattern appeared to be made of some kind of thick mercury. When he stepped on it, the pattern suddenly flashed a beam of starlight, which immediately consumed him. Zen, Elvinia shouted. Without thinking twice, she quickly followed him and jumped into the starry pattern. Like Zen, she also disappeared inside the mysterious starlight. The last who went in was the woman, the human betrayer. After the starlight had swallowed Zen, he looked around and found himself in a totally different space. Countless dots of light continuously fell down on him. A seemingly infinite number of stars illuminated the sky and formed a silver stream of light. Back then, he had once marveled at the beautiful starlight in his father's universe. However, the stars in his father's inner world paled in comparison to the current scenery in front of him. The number of stars above him was way beyond anyone could count. Stars fell from the sky, flew past the corner of his eye, then began to disappear from his view. It wasn't until he heard the whistle of the wind that he realized what was really going on. The stars weren't actually flying away from him, but rather, he was falling down fast. Below him was a huge continent that was shrouded in the darkness. It was originally as small as a hand in his eyes, but as he kept falling down, it rapidly expanded and the expanse of its territory became increasingly clear to him. Soon enough, a vast land appeared beneath him. Suddenly, he remembered that he was getting closer and closer to the ground. "I need to brace for impact," he exclaimed. Almost subconsciously, he attempted to fly up into the air. Rise, thunder materialization, wind. He used several methods in a row, but none of them worked to slow down his speed. It seemed that his thurgies were useless in this space. Just as he was about to hit the ground, an invisible force cushioned him from behind, then slowly and gently eased him down. Once he had landed, he got up from the ground and examined the state of his body first. "My inner world is gone. No, 9527. Master Regal Jade, can you hear me? I can't even use my chaotic source spirits. My body." When he was done carefully examining his body, he finally discovered that he was now reduced into an ordinary mortal. He couldn't even look into his inner world or use his chaotic energy, let alone release his spiritual sense or draw his soul out of his body. This mortal body was specially built for me to use in this illusion world. It is quite unique, but what is it for? He wondered. It was quiet everywhere in the dark wilderness. He had originally planned to find Elvenia first, but now it seemed impossible. There were no hints given in the test, so he had no choice but to move forward aimlessly. Due to his current mortal body, he was no longer as strong as he used to be. After he had strolled for 2 hours, he gradually felt worn out. He sensed a long-lost feeling of fatigue from deep within him. "I'm so tired." He wiped the sweat off his forehead. Although he had walked for such a long time, he bet that he should have been able to travel such a distance with a single step if he still had his real strength. The moment sleepiness and hunger began to overtake him, he suddenly saw a bonfire in the distance. Several people stood around the bonfire and held kebabs, which they grilled above the fire. The blazing flames illuminated the oil that dropped from the meat, which shone with a tempting glaze and burned with crackling sounds. The meat released a wonderful aroma that almost touched Zen's soul. It was an unimaginable temptation, especially for him who was currently so tired and hungry. The people around the bonfire soon saw him, and they all looked at him with awe and respect. They bowed respectfully to him, as if he was a great and authoritative figure. Somehow, he felt relieved at the way these people reacted to him. He pointed towards the kebabs and his orexis, or appetite, was clearly palpable. Among the 7 emotions and 6 desires humans possessed, the orexis was the most intense one. Ever since Zen no longer needed to eat food, he rarely had big meals apart from some special treats he had enjoyed in the Divine Land. Now that he was reduced to an ordinary mortal, his desire overwhelmed him when it had gotten aroused. "You can't eat this. If you eat this, you will die. If you die, you will be eliminated from the test." To his surprise, the people warned and stopped him, their faces filled with horror. In turn, he looked at them with confusion. Of course, he hadn't forgotten that he was still in an illusion, trying to pass the test the statue had arranged. Still, he refused to believe that he would die once he ate the meat. The meat kept giving off a tempting smell. Zen swallowed hard and reached out to the kebab, ready to feast on it. However, one of them took the meat before he could and gobbled it. After a few bites, the man's eyes suddenly rolled to the back of his head. He foamed at the mouth and fell heavily to the ground. "This is poisonous. You can't eat this, or else, you will die like him." The others warned him harshly once again. Afterwards, he glanced at the people's solemn faces and only rolled his eyes in response. "What a weird test. Am I only supposed not to eat a piece of meat?" he thought. As of now, he was still able to pull himself back. Previously in the dark region, the dark nether bugs had posed a great temptation to him, but he had still managed to suppress his desire. Thus, he believed a few pieces of roasted meat were no problem for him. He remained perfectly calm. On the other hand, those people kept fussing around like idiots and exclaimed that he shouldn't eat the poisonous meat. "Where is this place? What do you want? Is this the test for me?" he asked continuously. Despite his many questions, the people only turned a deaf ear to his words. In the end, he just shrugged and moved on. The world he was in was a boundless wilderness, and there seemed to be no end to it at all. Not even a single hint was given to him. The only thing he could do was move forward. After 4 more hours, he was finally completely exhausted. He felt his throat burn as thirst and hunger began to cloud his mind. "I need to eat and drink." As soon as the thought came to his mind, a gust of wind suddenly carried a delicate bouquet of wine to him. The wine's fragrance rushed into his nostrils, until it reached all the way into the depths of his soul. He shivered as he was deeply dazed and exhausted. Still, he managed to look up and saw some brilliant lights in front of him. There was a big table laden with various kinds of fruits, while fragrant wines of different colors filled the glasses and emitted an intoxicating scent. There were people who sat around the table, who all stood up and bowed respectfully to Zen. "Please help yourself to the wines and fruits," they said. "They didn't stop me from eating and drinking," he happily thought to himself. "But, you should know, they are all poisonous," someone suddenly warned. "What's wrong with you?" Zen grumbled. He glared sullenly at the people around him. He felt that he was about to go crazy. After he was demoted to an ordinary mortal, all of his emotions and desires felt authentic. Therefore, it was difficult for him to resist his instinct for eating. Finally, he couldn't help but satisfy his desire for food. Even though he had a very strong will, he now gave in to his orexis. As he stumbled helplessly towards the wines and fruits, he suddenly heard a voice in his mind that said, "If you die here, your previous efforts will be wasted." It was true that he had gone on a hard path before entering the temple. Of course, there was no way that he would resign himself to the prospect of losing right then and there. Chapter 3199, 6 Desires. No proper introduction was given regarding the rules of this world or how to pass the test. However, those people had already given Zen a clear hint. If he ate all the food, he would certainly die. His death would mean he'd surely be kicked out of the game. This round of the game would test his self-discipline and willpower. Although Zen's tremendous amount of experience had made his soul powerful beyond measure, it did not affect his decisiveness and willpower whatsoever. Besides, when one's willpower had increased to a certain extent, it would be difficult for it to advance further. Normally, Zen would have dealt with similar situations by utilizing the emotion-closing godly way. Now that he had lost all his abilities and thurges, it would be impossible for him to use it. A familiar scent wafted through his nose and made him swallow. It was wine. With a newfound determination, he turned around and left. In the wilderness, he was still alone. His body was exhausted from being pushed to its limit, a constant reminder of his hunger and thirst. It was so bad that he felt his throat was dry and burning with each exhale. This worsened once he saw light appear before him again. Beneath it was laid a bevy of delicious food. What would have normally been pure pleasure turned into pure torture at that moment. The light illuminated a mouthwatering and tempting array of food and wine, which suppressed Zen's waning restraint. He thought to himself a few times that this wasn't just merely a test but an act of torture as well. 8 hours passed, 10 hours passed, 20 hours passed. This mortal body he possessed, although strong, could only take so much. If it reached its limit, then he would die too. If I push this body too much, then I'll never be able to pass the test. He thought to himself as he walked onwards like a living corpse. When he was lost in his thoughts, everything before him faded into black as his eyes fell shut and his body fell to the ground with a thud. It took a while before he gradually regained his consciousness. He immediately and quickly took a look at his surroundings as he came out of his slumber. He should have been back at the temple if he failed. To his surprise, he wasn't in the wilderness nor the temple. Now he sat on a throne within the walls of a golden palace, his body covered in an imperial robe. At the bottom of the steps leading to the throne stood the civil and military ministers. "I'm not eliminated. Have I passed the first test?" he asked as he still sat on the throne, a slight hint of joy beginning to wash over him. The first round tested his desire for food and drink. What would the second test have in store for him? As Zen gazed down at the ministers gathered before him, his faces held strange expressions. He came to realize something and asked, "Will this round test my desire for power?" Since he was aware that everything was merely an illusion, he also knew that the power and wealth surrounding him were fake. He began to wonder how this test could work. Moreover, he never held a desire to possess a high position or vast amounts of wealth. This round of test wouldn't be too difficult, then. However, Zen would soon find out that this round would be anything but simple and easy. In a limited period of time, tests like this were meaningless. However, illusions such as this had the potential to make him feel as though hundreds or even thousands of years had passed. Zen was able to cope with this world with an indifferent attitude in the beginning. But as more time passed, he soon became more convinced that he was indeed the mortal emperor of this world for dozens of years. It appeared that his real memories were slowly fading away, as if to give space for his new, mortal memories to take over. He became entangled in the various situations of the citizens, ministers, and even concubines. In one way or another, he was involved with all of them. Within the temple, the statue located within its center tilted its head to gaze at the starry pattern. Among the stars, Zen, Elvenia, and the human woman were all undergoing different trials. The statue, which was a puppet, could still think like a normal person. However, it had its limits as well. Its current mission was to wait in the temple and choose the most qualified one. Deep within its heart, it had already rejected the idea of choosing the woman from the Nihility race or Elvenia from the beginning. If it had it its way, it would have prevented them both from entering the starry pattern and accepting the test in the first place. Will he find his end at this round? The statue uttered to no one in particular. In fact, Elvenia and the human woman were performing better than Zen. The woman from the Nihility race had already managed to pass 3 out of the 6 desire tests. What amazed the statue even further was the fact that Elvenia had passed 4 desire tests in a row, as if none of the desires had great control over her. She seemed to be totally in control of herself. I wonder if they know, the statue said, that the more complicated experiences one has, the harder it would be to make it through each test. The statue could do nothing more than let out a sigh and see what would happen next. In Elvenia's case, her past experiences were vast and unpleasant but far from complicated. Before meeting Zen, a majority of her life was boring. This gave her the mindset and resistance to be able to pass through the temptations with ease. Back in the illusion, Zen had believed that he had been emperor for nearly 100 years. He seemed to have completely forgotten who he truly was and now believed that he was someone else, the sovereign emperor of an imaginary kingdom. Throughout his rule, he had received numerous compliments from his subjects and every word he said was regarded as a law. 200 years passed, 300 years passed, 500 years passed. One day, a strange feeling suddenly overcame Zen. His original memories returned and crashed into him like a tidal wave. Soon, he recognized the ridiculousness of all that surrounded him. While he was realizing this, all the citizens, ministers and concubines turned into skeletons, their crumbling bones turning to dust that was swept away by the wind. The huge palace collapsed in the blink of an eye. Only then did Zen realize that he had been trapped in the test for a long time. It took him hundreds of years to pass the test. However, time in the starry illusion passed at a different rate from time in the outside world. In reality, Zen had only been trapped in that kingdom for 10 minutes. After Zen passed the test, the entire world began to change once more. Before him stood numerous beautiful women. Some of them were coquettish while others were more affectionate. A test of sexual desire. Zen raised his eyebrows. The third test was considerably easier for Zen. Although he was immortal now, he had already experienced love. The gorgeous women surrounding him were unsuccessful in tempting him any further. While they possessed the most pleasant and seductive voices and smelled of the most enticing perfumes, Zen was able to restrain himself. Slowly but surely, he passed the third test. The fourth test passed. The fifth test passed. Finally, the sixth test passed. Originally, Zen was lagging behind the other 2 competitors, in last place to pass the tests. But now that both women were stuck in the test of same desire, he was miraculously in the first place. Now that I've passed the tests of 6 desires, does this mean that I've passed the entire test? If this was what the starry illusion would always be like, then it should be a piece of cake for Zen. After all, he only had difficulty in the second test. But Zen remained in this world of illusions. He remained among the stars. As if sensing his confusion, the stars began to cover and spin around him once more. As a result, the spinning began to project spectacular scenes before his very eyes. The grand desolated land, the sea, the mountains. As the vision continued, he began to see the entire world before him from a great distance. What he initially thought he was staring at was the source world. However, he later confirmed that this was an entirely different world. Whereas the source world was shaped like a huge egg with numerous provinces within its shell, the world Zen saw before him at that moment was made up of countless stars. Chapter 3200, The God of Fire. Zen traveled through the stars. A huge star swept past his head, and as he gazed at it, all the knowledge of it drilled itself into his mind. Its name was Mysterious Earth, and 800 million humans lived on it. There are so many humans on this star, and none of them are secondary creatures from the inner worlds, Zen murmured to himself, amazed and deep in thought. He whizzed past 3 more stars and once again, their names jumped into his mind. There were 30 billion humans living on them. This number was truly impressive. He then saw many more stars up ahead. Perhaps being in this illusion for too long had slowed him mentally, for it was only now that he suddenly realized that this was the human race's chaotic era, also known as the 77th chaotic era. Zen had seen the chaotic eras of the dreaded eye demons in the regal jade civilization once. But whether it was the view shown to him by the Eye of Will or displayed through the civilization artifact by the regal jade spirit, they both paled in comparison to what he saw now. The sheer amount of stars was ridiculous, and each star housed hundreds of thousands of humans. If he was not aware he had been in an illusion, he would have treated this place as another source world. Swoosh! The stars sped up rapidly, zooming in at him and flying by in an instant. They varied in size. The small ones were thousands of miles in diameter, while the big ones were tens of millions of miles in diameter. Buzz! After passing through millions of them, finally, Zen looked upon a gigantic star before him. It was probably over 100 billion miles in diameter. Its entire body burned a fiery red, its surface a sea of hellfire. Blazing fire dragons spiraled up from the surface, spurting flames towards the sky. Wow, that's incredibly hot, Zen thought, feeling the heat as he approached the star. His body had now returned to its normal state, and although the heat was excruciating, he could handle it. As he got closer, a massive flame palace came into view below him, entirely dark red with molten lava flowing within. In such extreme heat as this, any material would be melted. Who knew what it actually was that flowed like lava? Even the fire spirits would find it difficult to survive here. The flame palace appeared to be the core of the entire star. When Zen landed in front of it, he saw someone ahead. It was a man with red hair and red eyebrows, sitting completely naked atop a huge fire lotus. When he saw Zen, he pointed at him and yelled, "Please sit down." "Who are you?" asked Zen. He recalled seeing a statue of this person in the temple. "I am Zhurong, the ruler of the fire region, and the god of fire," the red-haired man said proudly. 2 faint flames flickered in his eyes. They looked as though they could burn anything and everything. "The god of fire," Zen muttered, raising an eyebrow. Zhurong was one of the 39 heroes who had put their statues in the temple on the other shore. He was probably one of the top masters in the human race. "My test is very simple. Please sit next to me for 5 minutes, said Zhurong calmly, pointing to the fire lotus beside him. Zen blinked and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly as he jumped onto the fire lotus. The moment he sat down, flames ignited in the eyes of Zhurong's statue in the temple. The statue that was looking at the starry pattern noticed what Zhurong was doing. It smiled and said, "This guy just passed the tests of 6 desires, and now he has to take your test." "I will burn him to ashes," the statue of Zhurong replied, soft and frightening. The statues finished speaking and Zen's fire lotus in the starry illusion instantly turned to a blazing white. The white light surged up and enveloped Zen's body. Buzz, buzz. Zhurong looked on indifferently. He was perpetually irritable and cold-hearted. Even though only a wisp of his energy soul was in his statue, he was still incomparably harsh. Meeting him in the first test after the tests of 6 desires was a bad stroke of luck for Zen. However, his indifference didn't last long. Soon, his eyes widened strangely before his expression morphed to outright shock and disbelief. Golden vortexes circled Zen's body and absorbed all the heat from the fire lotus, which hadn't caused him much trouble at all. If things went on like this, Zen would most probably remain safe and sound no matter how long he sat there. Buzz. The fire lotus released even more heat. Its light turned from blazing white to brilliant blue, reflecting an odd color onto Zen's body. And yet Zen still sat motionless and unbothered. Swoosh. After 5 minutes, the fire lotus's heat gradually simmered down. Zen, still sitting on the fire lotus, cupped his hands towards Zhurong and asked, "Master Zhurong, have I passed the test?" Zhurong looked at Zen, confused. He had a lot of questions himself. But when he created this energy soul, he had set some limitations on it, so he was prevented from asking anything. "You may leave now," replied Zhurong briefly. Zen then left the palace and took off at blistering speed, quickly leaving this unimaginably huge star behind him. It was as Zhurong said that this area was known as the fire region and was once under his control. Once Zen had left the fire region, many icy blue stars floated towards him from the distance. They were terrifyingly large, their bodies crystal clear. Obviously, they were pure. Soon, a pure white star came straight at Zen. The strong stream of air on the outermost side of the star mixed with the snowstorm, capable of tearing through anything in its path. Zen entered the interior of the star, only to find it white and strangely quiet. A huge ice palace emerged in front of him, a thin man sitting alone inside it. His body was a translucent blue with ripples of water flowing across its surface. Before Zen could open his mouth to ask, the man introduced himself. I am Gonggong, the god of water. Please have a seat. After Zen met the god of fire, the sudden appearance of the god of water did not surprise him. Will all 39 statues test me in turn? He muttered in his heart.